The hydrospanner in Jace Rowan's hand slipped on the coupling, sending a jolt of vibration up his forearm that rattled his teeth. He swore, a short, sharp human sound that seemed exceptionally vulgar against the crystalline acoustics of the corridor. "Damn it," he muttered, wiping grease onto his fatigues. Jace leaned back, exhaling a breath that smelled of recycled air and caffeine. He was 34 years old, though the mirror in his quarters insisted he looked 45. His rank was Sergeant First Class. His specialty was combat engineering with a secondary certification in trauma medicine, and his current assignment was, effectively, to be a decoration. He stood in the lower maintenance artery of the Celestial Palace on Lyrian Prime. Above him, miles of floating crystal spires pierced the violet sky, suspended by gravity manipulation fields that hummed with a sound like a choir of glass flutes. The Seraphai, the ancient 7-foot-tall bioluminescent masters of this sector, liked their architecture to look like frozen music. Jace just wished they understood the concept of a standard metric bolt. Technically, humanity was a junior ally to the Seraphi Dominion. It was a polite way of saying that Earth had shown up to the galactic stage with rudimentary warp drives and projectile weapons, while the Seraphi had been weaving starlight into energy shields for 10,000 years. To show their benevolence, the Empire allowed a select few human units to serve in the capital as an honor guard. Jace checked the diagnostic pad on his wrist. The energy conduit was stable. He picked up his toolkit and began the long walk back to the surface levels. Being a human on Lyrian was an exercise in constant subtle humiliation. The Seraphai were beautiful. There was no other word for it. They were tall, slender, and possessed skin that seemed to hold a soft internal light, shifting colors with their moods. When they moved, they flowed like water. Jace, with his calloused hands, square jaw, and the shrapnel scar running from his left ear to his collarbone, felt like a brick in a jewelry box. He emerged from the maintenance lift into the grand concourse. The scale of the place always hit him first. The ceiling was a transparent dome 3,000 feet across, showing the swirling auroras of the planetary shield grid. Banners of light, hard light projections of the great Seraphai houses, hung in the air, rippling in a non-existent breeze. Below them, stark and ugly by comparison, were the prefabricated durasteel bunkers of the human embassy, sitting on the polished marble floor like luggage left at a train station. Jace adjusted the collar of his dress uniform. He was supposed to be on perimeter duty for the Treaty of the Three Suns ceremony. He was late. He jogged past a holographic news feed hovering in mid-air. A Seraphai news anchor, her skin glowing a soft, worried lavender, was speaking in the musical tones of the high tongue. The translation subtitles scrolled in blocky human text at the bottom. Border tensions increase in the 7th sector. Reports of missing supply convoys confirmed. Trade treaty negotiations to conclude today amid security concerns. Jace slowed his pace as he passed 2 Seraphai Palace guards. They stood like statues holding energy pikes that crackled with blue lightning. They did not look at him. To them, he was part of the furniture, or perhaps a pet that had learned to walk upright. He found his spot near the rear of the human delegation. Lieutenant Miller, a fresh-faced officer who still thought this posting was an adventure, nudged him. "Nice of you to join us." "Sergeant," Miller whispered. "You smell like hydraulic fluid. It is the smell of honest work." "Sir," Jace replied, keeping his voice low. "Something no one else in this palace seems to do." Miller smirked but straightened his posture. "Quiet. Her radiance is approaching." The heavy thrum of drums echoed through the vast space. The crowd, a mix of thousands of Seraphai nobles and a few hundred stiff-backed humans, went silent. Queen Alira saith. Jace had seen her on screens. Of course, every human had. She was the face of the Alliance, the benevolent monarch who had argued against enslaving humanity, and instead offered them partnership. Seeing her in person was different. She entered on a floating dais, surrounded by the Talon Guard. She was small for a Seraphite, perhaps only 6 feet tall, which made her look delicate among her towering kin. Her skin was a pale, luminous pearl white, marked with swirling bioluminescent patterns of gold that traced her cheekbones and throat. She wore a gown that seemed to be woven from thunderclouds and diamonds, shifting from gray to brilliant white as she moved. She looked ethereal. She also looked exhausted. Jace had spent enough time in field hospitals to know the look of someone running on adrenaline and caffeine. Her shoulders were set too tight. The glow of her skin was rapid and high frequency, a sign of stress. She was barely 20 years old in human terms, thrust onto the throne after her parents died in a shuttle accident that the official reports called a tragic malfunction and the barracks rumors called a hit. She stepped off the dais and approached the podium. The microphone amplified her voice, making it resonate in Jace's chest. "We stand at the precipice of a new era," Alira said. Her voice was clear, bell-like, but possessed a core of steel. "For 1,000 cycles, the Dominion has stood alone, but strength is not found in isolation. It is found in the weaving of different threads into a single rope. Humanity brings a fire, a resilience that we have long forgotten." Jace stifled a yawn. He had heard the speech before. It was the standard "we value you, distinct junior partners" boilerplate. He let his eyes wander, scanning the upper balconies. Force of habit. You didn't survive 3 tours in the Rim Wars by watching the pretty speeches. You survived by watching the exits. Then he felt it, a weight, a sensation like static electricity brushing against the back of his neck. He looked back at the podium. Queen Alira had stopped speaking for a fraction of a second. Her large, violet eyes were looking directly at him. It was impossible. He was one face in a sea of thousands, standing in the back row, covered in engine grease. But the connection was instant and visceral. For a heartbeat, the distance collapsed. He saw a flash of terrifying clarity in her expression, not the regal mask of a queen, but the wide-eyed panic of a girl standing on a trap door. She knows, he thought. The moment broke. Alira blinked, her expression smoothing back into perfect royalty, and continued her speech. "We signed this treaty not just as allies, but as family." Jace shook his head. He was imagining things. War fatigue did that to you. It made you see danger in a butterfly and hidden messages in a sneeze. He stepped back from the formation, signaling to Miller that he needed to check the perimeter sensors. Miller waved him off, annoyed. Jace moved toward the side corridors, needing to get away from the droning speeches. He ducked into a service alcove, intending to check his comms, when he heard voices. They were coming from around the corner, low and urgent, Seraphite voices. The translation software in his earpiece struggled with the rapid, informal dialect. "Shields are cycled to the lower harmonic," a deep voice hissed. "It is too soon," a second voice replied. "The human ambassador is not yet in position. It does not matter. The Order wants it done now. The chaos will cover the extraction. If the Queen falls today, the humans take the blame. If she survives, she is weak. Either way, the alliance ends." Jace froze. His hand dropped instinctively to the heavy sidearm at his hip. He didn't have his rifle. Ceremonial regulations forbade long guns in the presence of the monarch. All he had was a kinetic pistol and a combat knife. He peeked around the corner. 2 Seraphite officers in the dark crimson uniforms of the Palace Guard were conferring over a data pad. One of them tapped the screen, and the device turned red. Jace activated his comms, keeping his voice a harsh whisper. "Command, this is Rowan. I have a code black. Potential inside threat. 2 hostiles in Sector 4 discussing sabotage. Request immediate." The world turned white. There was no sound at first, just a pressure wave that slammed Jace backward into the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. Then came the roar, a deafening, tearing sound as if the sky itself was being ripped in half. The floor heaved. Jace hit the ground, rolling instinctively. Dust and smoke billowed instantly, filling the pristine corridor with a choking gray fog. "Rowan!" Miller's voice screamed in his earpiece, distorted by static. "Rowan, report! The main dome is breached. We are taking fire from the upper." The line went dead with a squeal of feedback. Jace scrambled to his feet. The beautiful silence of the Celestial Palace was gone, replaced by the screaming of alarms and the distinctive thumping of plasma fire. He didn't run away. He ran toward the noise. He burst back into the grand concourse and skidded to a halt. It was a slaughterhouse. The great transparent dome above had been shattered. Shards of crystal the size of cars were raining down onto the crowd. Through the gap, black sleek shapes swooped down. Drones. They were cloaked, shimmering into visibility only to fire unstable red plasma bolts into the panicked mob. But the worst fire wasn't coming from the sky. It was coming from the balconies. The crimson-clad guards, the ones sworn to protect the Queen, were firing into the crowd. Treason. Jace spat. A human diplomat ran past him, clutching a bleeding arm. Jace grabbed him by the collar, shoving him toward the hardened bunkers. "Move! Get inside the perimeter!" He scanned the dais. The floating platform where the Queen had stood was gone, blasted out of the air. The impact zone was a crater of smoking marble near the north wing archway. Jace drew his pistol. He sprinted across the open floor, weaving between falling debris. A drone shrieked down, targeting a group of huddled technicians. Jace raised his weapon, leading the target, and fired 3 rounds. The kinetic slugs, tipped with depleted uranium, punched through the drone's lightweight engine casing. It spun out of control and smashed into a pillar. He reached the wreckage of the dais. Bodies were scattered everywhere, loyal guards in gold armor, cut down by their traitorous brothers in red. He dropped to a knee beside a Seraphi guard who was trying to hold his intestines in with blue-stained hands. Jace slapped a coagulant patch onto the wound. "Where is she?" Jace shouted over the roar of the battle. The guard gasped, his eyes glazing over. The north wing, the retreat tunnel, collapsed. "She is under the stone." Jace looked at the north wing. The archway had crumbled, burying the entrance in tons of rubble. Fires were starting to lick at the edges of the stone, fed by severed gas lines. Jace tapped his wrist computer, scanned for biosignatures, range 50 meters. The display flickered. One signal, faint, buried deep. He didn't think. He didn't consider that he was a human engineer and she was an alien monarch. He just saw a job. He holstered his pistol and sprinted toward the burning ruin. The heat was intense. The Seraphi loved their open flames and aesthetic torches. And now the ruptured gas lines were turning the corridor into a blast furnace. Jace activated the environmental seal on his helmet, but he was wearing dress armor, not a hazard suit. The heat warning chimed instantly. He reached the pile of debris blocking the hall. Massive beams of crystal and stone were wedged together. He grabbed a jagged slab of marble and heaved. It didn't budge. "Come on," he growled. He pulled a microcharge from his utility belt, standard issue for combat engineers, usually used for blowing hinges off doors. He slapped it onto the stress point of the largest beam. "Fire in the hole!" he yelled to no one. The detonation was a sharp crack. The beam fractured. Jace threw his shoulder against it, muscles screaming, and shoved. The stone shifted, grinding aside just enough to create a crawl space. He dove through, sliding down a slope of gravel into the darkness beyond. The room was a pocket of trapped air amidst the destruction. It had been a private receiving chamber. Now, the ceiling was angled sharply downward, held up by a single groaning pillar. In the center of the room, trapped under a fallen tapestry and a heavy lighting fixture, was Queen Illyra. She was not the ethereal figure from the podium. She was covered in gray dust. Her gown was torn at the shoulder, revealing violet blood seeping from a deep gash. Her hair, usually a halo of light, was singed and matted. Jace scrambled over to her. "Your Majesty?" Her eyes fluttered open. They were hazy, unfocused. Concussion. "You," she whispered. "The human. Sergeant Rowan. Ma'am, I am getting you out of here." He checked the beam pinning her legs. It was heavy, but not immovable. The problem was the ceiling. The pillar supporting it was cracking. Every vibration from the battle outside sent dust showering down on them. "I cannot." "Move," she gasped. "My legs." "They aren't broken," Jace said, scanning her quickly with his medical tricorder. "Just pinned. But we have to move now. The roof is coming down." He jammed his pry bar under the beam. "On 3. 1, 2, 3, he roared, putting his back into the lift. The beam rose 2 inches. Illyra cried out in pain but scrambled backward, dragging her legs free. Jace dropped the beam. It slammed down, cracking the floor. "Can you walk?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She tried to stand, but her knees buckled. She fell against him. Her skin was burning hot to the touch, her bioluminescence flashing erratically in patterns of distress. "No," she murmured. "The pain." Jace looked at the exit. The fire had jumped the gap. The crawl space he had entered through was now wreathed in flames, and the only way out was back through the fire. He looked at the Queen. She was shaking. "Forgive me." "Your Majesty," Jace said. "This is going to be undignified." He didn't wait for permission. He stooped and scooped her up. He didn't carry her bridal style, that was for movies. He slung her over his shoulder in a fireman's carry, distributing her weight across his back. She was heavier than she looked. Dense bone structure, high gravity adaptation. "Put me down," she protested weakly, thumping his back with a fist. "Shut up and hold on." Jace grunted. He charged at the wall of fire. The heat hit him like a physical blow. His uniform scorched. He tucked his head down, shielding his face with his arm, and plunged into the flames. The world became orange and roaring. He felt the fire licking at his boots, felt the searing pain on his exposed neck. He held his breath, counting the steps. 1, 2, 3. He stumbled over a piece of debris, nearly going down. If he fell here, they both died. He locked his knees, driving upward with a grunt of exertion that tore at his throat. "Keep moving. Just keep moving." He burst through the curtain of fire and out into the main corridor. It wasn't over. The battle was raging right in front of him. A squad of traitor guards saw him emerge from the smoke, a soot-stained human carrying their target. "There!" one of them shouted. "Kill the human! Secure the Queen!" Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, turning the stone around Jace into molten slag. Jace didn't stop. He couldn't return fire. His hands were full of Queen. He ran. He zigzagged between the pillars, his boots slipping on blood and glass. A bolt grazed his shoulder, cauterizing the wound instantly. He screamed but didn't slow down. "Cover fire!" he bellowed into his dead comms. "Anyone, cover fire!" Miraculously, someone listened. A pulse of heavy machine gun fire ripped from the human embassy bunkers. Lieutenant Miller and the human security detail were laying down a wall of lead. The traitor guards were forced to duck as high-caliber rounds chewed up their cover. Jace sprinted the last 50 yards across the open concourse. His lungs were burning, his legs felt like lead, and the queen was a dead weight on his shoulders. He reached the human barricade and collapsed. "Friendly! Friendly coming in!" Miller shouted. Soldiers swarmed around them. Hands grabbed Jace, hauling him behind the durasteel wall. Other hands reached for the queen. Jace rolled onto his back, gasping for air, staring up at the shattered dome. The smoke was clearing. The traitor forces were retreating. Their surprise attack blunted by the stubborn human defense. He sat up, coughing up black soot. Is she okay?" The circle of soldiers parted. Queen Alara was sitting on the floor. She was a mess of soot, blood, and torn silk. She pushed away the medics who were trying to scan her. She was looking at Jace. Her eyes were no longer hazy. They were wide, luminous, and filled with a terrifying intensity. The bioluminescent markings on her skin were glowing a blinding, solid gold. She crawled toward him. "Your Majesty?" Miller asked, stepping forward nervously. "We need to get you to the infirmary." She ignored him. She reached Jace. He tried to scramble backward, unsettled by the look in her eyes, but his back hit the barricade. She reached out and placed her palm flat against the center of his chest, right over his heart. Her hand was cool, contrasting with the heat of his skin. Jace froze. The soldiers around them fell silent. A camera drone, hovering nearby, zoomed in, broadcasting the image to billions of screens across the sector. Alara took a breath, her voice trembling but audible in the sudden silence. "By flame and blood," she whispered. "You carried your queen through death's door." Jace blinked, confused. "I was just doing my job, ma'am." She shook her head slowly. Her fingers curled into his uniform. "You walked through the fire. You did not let go." She leaned in closer, her forehead almost touching his. "You are my husband now." The silence that followed was absolute. Jace stared at her. His brain, usually quick to process tactical data, ground to a complete halt. "I'm sorry," Jace rasped. "I think I have hearing damage. It sounded like you said—" "It is the law of the ash," Alara said, her voice gaining strength, projecting so her own stunned guards could hear. "A life for a life. A bond for a bond. You carried me through the flames. I am alive because of your body and your will." She looked up, glaring at the Seraphi captain who had just rushed up to the barricade. "Let it be written," the queen commanded. "This man is my consort. He is under the protection of the throne." The captain looked like he had swallowed a lemon. "But your radiance, he is a human. He is my husband," she snapped. Then her eyes rolled back in her head, and she collapsed forward, unconscious, into Jace's lap. Jace sat there, hands hovering over the unconscious monarch of the Seraphi dominion. He looked up at Miller. Miller's mouth was hanging open. "Did I just get married?" Jace asked. "I think so." "Sergeant," Miller whispered. Jace looked down at Alara. She looked small and fragile now, curled against his chest. "Oh, hell," Jace said. The next 6 hours were a blur of aggressive bureaucracy. Jace was separated from the queen immediately after the medics arrived. He wasn't taken to a hospital. He was taken to a holding cell in the Ministry of State Security. It was a nice cell, as cells went. The walls were white marble, and the energy barrier was a tasteful shade of amber. But it was still a cell. He had been stripped of his armor and weapons. He was wearing a simple gray tunic that was too tight in the shoulders. He sat on the bench, staring at the wall, trying to make the math work in his head. The door hissed open. A human entered. It was Ambassador Sterling, the head of the diplomatic mission. He looked like he had aged 10 years since the morning. "Sergeant Rowan," Sterling said, not sitting down. "Mr. Ambassador, am I under arrest?" Sterling rubbed his temples. "Honestly, I don't know. The Seraphi High Council is currently screaming at each other in the chamber upstairs. Half of them want to give you a medal. The other half want to execute you for touching the royal personage." "And the marriage thing?" Jace asked. Sterling winced. "That is complicated. It appears the Queen invoked a very old, very obscure wartime precedent. Technically, under Seraphi law, she is correct. If a warrior carries a royal through living fire and saves them, the royal owes a life debt. The Queen has the option to discharge that debt by elevating the warrior to the status of consort." Jace stood up. "Sir, I don't want to be a consort. I have a lease on an apartment in Ohio. I have a cat." Sterling sighed. "The cat is fine, Sergeant, but you need to understand the situation. The images of you carrying her out of the fire are playing on every screen in the Empire. You are currently the most famous human in history. The loyalist factions are calling you a hero sent by the stars. The isolationist factions are calling you a witch who bewitched the Queen with human pheromones." "Witch?" Jace asked incredulously. "I'm a combat engineer." Sterling looked at him gravely. "Listen to me, Jace. This isn't about what you are. It's about what you represent. The attack today was an inside job. We know that. The Queen knows that. Someone tried to kill her to stop the alliance. By saving her, and by her claiming you, she has doubled down. She has tied her survival to humanity." "So I'm a political prop," Jace said, his voice bitter. "You are the husband of the Queen," Sterling corrected. "And right now, that is the most dangerous job in the universe." The door hissed open again. A Seraphi guard, wearing the gold armor of the Queen's personal household, stepped in. He looked at Jace with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "The Queen is awake," the guard announced. "She summons the consort." Sterling nodded to Jace. "Good luck, son. Don't bow too low. You're royalty now." Jace walked toward the door. He felt more fear now than he had when he ran into the fire. He wasn't equipped for this. He could fix engines. He could patch bullet wounds. He couldn't fix empires. As he stepped into the corridor, flanked by alien giants, Jace Rowan realized two things. First, he was definitely not getting his security deposit back on the apartment in Ohio. Second, the war hadn't ended in that burning hallway. It had just begun. The light in the room was wrong. It was not the harsh fluorescent glare of a military medical bay, nor the soft yellow warmth of Earth sunlight. It was a fluid, shifting twilight of violet and pale gold that seemed to pulse in time with a heartbeat. Jace Rowan opened his eyes and immediately wished he hadn't. His head felt like it had been stuffed with wet cotton, and his body was floating in a suspension of warm, viscous gel. He tried to sit up, but the gel held him firm. "Easy, human," a voice rumbled. It sounded like gravel grinding against a hull plate. Jace turned his head. Standing beside the medical tank was a Seraphi warrior in full ceremonial armor. The alien was massive, nearly 7.5 feet tall, with skin the color of polished obsidian and bioluminescent markings glowing a deep, angry crimson. He wore the crest of the Talon Guard. Jace recognized the rank insignia etched into the shoulder plates. "Captain." "Am I dead?" Jace croaked. His throat felt surprisingly clear, likely the work of the gel. "No," the captain said, crossing his arms, "though there are many in the High Council who wish you were." Jace groaned and tapped the side of the tank. "Get me out of this soup." The captain pressed a holographic rune on the console. The gel drained away instantly, vanishing into floor vents. The glass wall slid down. Jace stumbled out, shivering as the air hit his skin, but a warm drying field swept over him before his feet touched the floor. He looked down at himself. His scars were still there, the shrapnel marks on his ribs, the burn on his shoulder from the rescue, but the skin was knit together, pink and new. "Where is the Queen?" Jace asked, grabbing a silk robe that had been laid out on a nearby bench. "Her radiance is in recovery," the captain said. "I am Captain Kalen. I am head of her personal detail. And you, Jace Rowan, are a complication." Jace tied the robe, feeling ridiculous in the shimmering fabric. "Look, Captain, I know the drill. Debriefing, NDA forms, maybe a medal I can't wear in public, and then you ship me back to Earth. Just point me to the shuttle." Kalen let out a short, barking laugh that held no humor. "You are not going back to Earth, Sergeant. You are not going anywhere." "What does that mean?" "It means," Kalen said, stepping closer, looming over Jace with intimidating grace, "that when her radiance placed her hand on your chest and spoke the rites of ash, she invoked a law older than your entire civilization. You are not a guest, you are not a prisoner, you are the consort." Jace rubbed his face. "Yeah, the marriage thing. Look, she was concussed. She was in shock. It doesn't count." "It counts," Kalen said, his voice dropping to a low growl. "The entire court witnessed it. The news feeds have broadcast it to 12 systems. To annul the bond now would be to admit the Queen was mentally unstable during a crisis. It would shatter her authority while half the Senate is already trying to remove her. You are bound, human, until death or decree." Jace stared at the alien giant. He felt a cold knot of dread tighten in his stomach. He was a combat engineer. He fixed bridges. He blew up obstacles. He did not do politics. "I need to see her," Jace said. Kalen nodded slowly. "I know. She has summoned you. Try not to embarrass us." The Queen's private audience chamber was less of a room and more of a garden suspended in the sky. The walls were transparent diamond glass, offering a panoramic view of the capital city. Lyrian, as it smoked and rebuilt in the distance. Strange, glowing flora grew from floating planters, filling the air with a scent like cinnamon and rain. Queen Elira was standing by the window, her back to him. She was not wearing the heavy ceremonial armor or the grand robes of state she had worn during the attack. She wore a simple tunic of white silk that left her arms bare, revealing the faint, fading bruises where the rubble had pinned her. Jace stood in the doorway, feeling acutely underdressed in his borrowed tunic and trousers. He cleared his throat. "Your Majesty." Elira turned. The movement was fluid, but there was a stiffness in her neck that betrayed her tension. Her violet eyes locked onto his. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them felt charged, heavy with the memory of fire and the smell of burning stone. "Sergeant Rowan," she said. Her voice was steady, regal, the voice of a ruler who commanded star fleets. "Jace," he corrected automatically, "or just Rowan. Sergeant feels odd, considering." He gestured vaguely between them. Elira's composure cracked, just for a second. A flush of indigo color rippled across her high cheekbones. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. "Jace," she repeated, testing the sound. She walked over to a low table made of carved drift glass and gestured for him to sit. He sat, the chair molding instantly to his human frame. "I trust your wounds have healed?" she asked, pouring a clear blue liquid into 2 cups. "The jelly tank worked wonders," Jace said. "Better than the Bacta patches we use. How are you?" "I am whole," she said. She pushed a cup toward him. He took it but didn't drink. "We need to talk about what happened." "Elira," Jace said, dropping the titles. He saw her eyes widen slightly at the informality, but she didn't stop him. "You mean the rescue," she said. "I mean the wedding," Jace said bluntly. Elira let out a long breath, her shoulders sagging. The regal mask slipped further, revealing a young woman who looked incredibly tired. "It was not a wedding in the way you understand it," she said, picking up her cup. "It is the law of the ash. In the ancient times, before the energy shields and the warp gates, we fought with blades and fire. If a warrior carried a royal through the flames of a lost battle and both survived, a debt was created, a life for a life." She looked at him, her gaze intense. "The law demands the queen grant the savior a boon. Usually it is a life debt, gold, land, a title. But in that moment..." She paused, her fingers tightening around the glass. "I was terrified. Jace. I was half blind from the smoke. I could feel the minds of my own guards dying around me. I felt the malice of the ones who betrayed me. And then there was you." She looked at his hands, resting on the table. They were broad, scarred, rough-skinned hands. "You were a solid point in a spinning world," she whispered. "When we reached the barricade, I felt the political sharks circling. I knew if I showed weakness, if I just thanked you and fainted, they would say I was unfit. They would use you as a prop and discard you. I panicked. I chose the strongest bond the law allows to protect us both. I declared you my husband." Jace stared at her. "So you married me because you were scared and wanted to make a point to your generals?" Elira winced. "When you say it like that, it sounds foolish. It sounds insane," Jace said, leaning forward. "Elira, I am a mechanic. I fix hover tanks. I drink cheap coffee. I don't know the first thing about running an empire. You have bound yourself to a grunt. I bound myself to the man who walked into an inferno when my own Talon guard hesitated." Elira snapped, her voice rising, the bioluminescence on her neck flaring bright gold. "Do not insult yourself. Jace Rowan, you carried me. Do you know the weight of that symbol?" "I know symbols don't stop blaster bolts," Jace shot back. "And half your court wants me dead." "Then we must disappoint them," Elira said, regaining her cool. "The bond is done. To break it now would destroy my credibility and likely result in your accidental death at the hands of zealous traditionalists. We are stuck with each other." Jace took a drink of the blue liquid. It tasted like peppermint and electricity. "Fine," he said, slamming the cup down. "We are married. What now?" "Now," Elira said, a faint mischievous smile touching her lips. "You must learn how not to trip over your own sword." The council chamber was a circular room dominated by a holographic map of the galaxy. 12 seats surrounded it. 11 were occupied by sci-fi nobles in towering headdresses and flowing robes. The 12th seat was empty. Jace stood behind Elira's throne, hands clasped behind his back, trying to look like he belonged there. He could feel the stares of the counselors. They looked at him like he was a stain on the carpet. Lord Vadran sat at the Queen's right hand. He was old for a sci-fi, his skin a deep, craggy gray, his eyes milky white. He leaned on a staff made of twisted white metal. "Your radiance," Vadran said, his voice smooth and oily. "While the populace is amused by your choice of consort, we must address the reality. The human is a security risk. He has no clearance. He has no breeding. He has ears." "My lord," Jace said. Vadran turned his head slowly, his milky eyes narrowing. Elira raised a hand. "The consort stays. He earned his place by blood. Proceed with the report on the attack." Vadran bowed his head, a gesture that looked more like mockery than respect. As you wish. The investigation suggests a rogue cell of radical separatists. We have found debris from unauthorized drones. We believe they were smuggled in by human sympathizers. Jace frowned. That's not right, he thought. The drones I shot down had high-grade military casings. He kept his mouth shut, but he saw Elira stiffen. We will investigate all leads, Elira said, including internal security breaches. A ripple of unease went through the council. Another counselor, Lady Alara, spoke up. She was younger, her light shifting in soft blue tones. The people are rallying. Your Majesty, the image of the human carrying you has become viral. Enlistment in the Joint Defense Fleets is up 40%. They call him the Iron Shield. Vadran scoffed. A temporary infatuation? The novelty will fade, and when it does, we will be left with a primitive in the royal bedchamber. Jace saw Elira's hand grip the armrest of her throne until her knuckles turned white. He stepped forward, just an inch. Breaking protocol. I may be primitive, Lord Vadran, Jace said, his voice cutting through the room. But I noticed your personal guard was nowhere near the North Wing when the explosion happened. Strange place for elite security to be absent from. Silence filled the room. Vadran stared at Jace, and for the first time, there was real hatred in those milky eyes. Elira stood up. The council is dismissed. As the nobles filed out, Vadran paused by Jace. Enjoy your time in the palace, human, Vadran whispered. Accidents happen so frequently here. I'll keep my eyes open, Jace replied. The training ground of the Talon Guard was a high-gravity arena floating on a detached platform. Jace was currently lying on his back, staring up at the artificial sky, gasping for air. Get up, consort, a female voice taunted. Jace groaned and rolled over. Standing over him was Lyra, a Talon lieutenant. She was fast, strong, and seemed to enjoy using Jace as a punching bag. He scrambled to his feet, raising his practice staff. I am up. I am up. Adjust your stance, Lyra barked. You stand like a tree. You must move like water. I am made of meat and calcium, Lyra. Jace grunted, blocking a strike that rattled his bones. I don't flow. She swept his legs. He hit the mat again. Then you will break, she said, offering a hand to pull him up. Jace took it. He was wearing a suit of Seraphite training armor. It was bioorganic, a living material that bonded to the wearer's nervous system. It was also incredibly tight. This armor, Jace complained, tugging at the chest piece. It rides up. It feels like I'm wearing a calamari. Lyra laughed, a musical sound. It is designed to enhance your reflexes, and it shows off your sturdy physique. The Queen will be pleased. Jace flushed. Can we not talk about pleasing the Queen? The other guards, who had been watching from the sidelines, chuckled. They were slowly warming up to him. He wasn't graceful, but he kept getting up. Soldiers respected that. Again, Lyra ordered. Jace gritted his teeth. He swung the staff, putting his weight behind it, using a dirty human fighting trick, a feint followed by a shoulder check. He caught Lyra off guard. She stumbled back. Ha! Jace grinned. Lyra smirked. Not bad. For a tree. That evening, Elira summoned him to her private sanctum again. She looked troubled. She was staring at a datapad, her light dim and gray. Jace, she said, not looking up. Sit with me. He sat beside her on a velvet divan. What is it? Vadran giving you trouble? Always. She sighed. She placed the pad down and turned to him. But that is not why I called you. I need you to understand something. The bond, it is not just legal, it is psychic. Jace blinked. Wait, you mean you can read my mind? Not exactly, she said. Seraphi are mildly telepathic. The life bond creates a bridge. I can feel your emotions, your confusion, your protectiveness. And my annoyance at the tight pants? Jace asked. She smiled faintly. That too. But I want to show you something. I want you to see what I saw. She reached out and placed her fingertips on his temples. Close your eyes. Jace closed his eyes. The world dropped away. Suddenly, he was a Lyra. He felt small. He felt the heavy weight of the crown on his head. He felt the suffocating pressure of 1,000 eyes watching him, judging him, waiting for him to fail. Then, the explosion. Panic. Pure white-hot animal terror. The ceiling coming down. The pain of the stone crushing his legs. The darkness. He lay there in the dark, unable to breathe, feeling the smoke fill his lungs. He felt the resignation. This is it. I die here. I die alone, just like my parents. Then, a noise, a crash, light spilling in, a figure silhouetted against the fire, a human, small, fragile, but moving with a stubborn, angry determination. Jace felt Alira's awe. She saw him not as a mechanic, but as a being of pure will. She felt his arms go around her, strong, rough, safe. She felt the heat of the fire, but the fear vanished, replaced by a single overwhelming thought. He has me. I am safe. The connection broke. Jace gasped, opening his eyes. He was back in the room. Alira was staring at him, tears shimmering in her violet eyes. You were so scared, Jace whispered. I was a child lost in the dark, she admitted, until you found me. Jace reached out, his hand hesitating, then covering hers. It was an instinctive gesture, breaking a dozen protocols, but she turned her hand over and laced her fingers with his. I'm not going anywhere, Jace said softly. Bond or no bond, I don't leave people behind. The diplomatic ball was an assault on the senses. The grand ballroom of the palace was a sphere of crystal floating high above the city. Starlight filtered through the floor and ceiling. 3,000 guests, ambassadors, warlords, corporate magnates, milled about in a sea of jewels and silks. Jace stood next to Alira at the head of the receiving line. He had been stuffed into a formal dress uniform, a high-collared tunic of midnight blue with gold embroidery, and a cape that kept getting tangled in his legs. Stand straight, Alira murmured, her lips barely moving. And smile. The Signian ambassador is looking at you. Jace fixed a rictus grin on his face. He looks like a giant lobster in a tuxedo. Hush, she scolded, though he felt a ripple of amusement through their mental link. The music started, a soaring, complex orchestral piece played on instruments of light. The first dance, Alira said. It is traditional. Jace panicked. I don't dance. I lean against walls and drink punch. Follow my lead, she said, taking his hand. She pulled him onto the floor. The crowd parted, forming a wide circle. Jace felt like a bug under a magnifying glass. Right hand on my waist, Alira instructed, left hand in mine. Now, step. They moved. Jace was stiff, counting the beats in his head. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. Stumble. He stepped on her toe. Sorry, he hissed. She didn't flinch. Keep moving. Look at me, not your feet. He looked up. Alira was breathtaking. In the starlight, her skin glowed with a soft, ethereal luminescence. Her eyes were deep pools of violet. She was looking at him with an intensity that made his breath catch. For a moment, the crowd disappeared. It was just the heat of her hand in his, the scent of her hair, like ozone and night-blooming flowers filling his nose. You are doing fine, she whispered. I'm stepping on the queen of the Dominion, Jace muttered. I'm causing an intergalactic incident. She pulled him closer, her body pressing against his. The bioorganic armor beneath his tunic reacted to her proximity, humming faintly. Let them talk, she said fiercely. Let them see us. She spun him, a move that should have been impossible for his clumsy feet, but she guided him with a strength that belied her size. They came to a halt in the center of the floor, chest to chest. Jace looked down at her. Her lips were parted. The telepathic bond flared. He felt a rush of desire, sharp and sudden, radiating from her. It mirrored his own. He leaned in. The distance between them shrank to nothing. He could feel her breath on his chin. Your Majesty, a voice interrupted. They sprang apart. Lord Vadran was standing there, a smirk on his gray face. A lovely display, Vadran said. The peasantry will be enchanted, but the trade delegation awaits. Elira straightened, her mask slamming back into place. Thank you. Lord Vadran, we are coming. She squeezed Jace's hand once, a secret reassurance, before turning to face the politics. Jace escaped the ballroom an hour later. He needed air, and he needed to think. He found a secluded terminal in a security alcove. He had been itching to check something since the council meeting. He inserted a data spike he had jury-rigged from spare parts. Accessing security logs. Sector 4. Time of attack. The holographic display scrolled with data, energy signatures, weapon discharge patterns, shield harmonics. Jace narrowed his eyes. He highlighted a section of the code. The drones that attacked the palace used phased plasma. Standard terrorist weapon. Messy, unstable. But here, he pointed at a jagged red line on the graph. This was the energy signature that collapsed the North Wing archway. It wasn't phased plasma. It was a coherent anti-proton beam. Clean, precise, military grade. And not just any military. He recognized the harmonic frequency. It matched the signature of the heavy repeaters mounted on the palace guard perimeter towers. Friendly fire, Jace whispered. Someone had reprogrammed the palace defenses to target the Queen's escape route. It wasn't just a breach. The call came from inside the house. He downloaded the data to a secure chip and hid it in his boot. He found Elira on the balcony of her private suite. The ball was over. She had taken off the heavy crown and the jeweled cape. She was leaning against the railing, looking out at the floating towers of Lyrian. Jace joined her. The wind was cool at this altitude. Did you survive the sharks? He asked. Barely, she said. The Trade Federation wants lower tariffs. The Mining Guild wants fewer regulations. They all want a piece of me. She turned to face him. Her face was shadowed, but her bioluminescence cast a soft glow on her features. Tonight, on the dance floor. She started, then stopped. I felt it too, Jace said quietly. Elira let out a shaky laugh. I had a plan, you know. Before all this, I thought I would rule alone for a few years. Then maybe I would choose a partner, someone from a minor house, someone safe. I wanted to choose. I know, Jace said. I wanted to retire, buy a boat, fish for things that don't shoot back. Elira looked at him. Do you regret it? Picking me up? Jace looked at the scar on his hand. He thought about the heat of the fire. He thought about the way she had looked at him in the training room, the way her hand felt in his. No, he said honestly. I don't regret saving you, but being a symbol, being the husband, that terrifies me. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm waiting for you to realize I'm just a guy with a wrench. Elira stepped closer. She reached up and touched his face, her thumb tracing the line of his jaw. You are more than that, Jace, I felt your mind. You are brave. You are kind. And you are the only person in this entire palace who tells me the truth. She leaned her head against his chest. I think, she whispered, that this accident might be the only real thing in my life. Jace wrapped his arms around her. He felt the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders, and for the first time, he didn't want to run away. He wanted to help her carry it. We have a problem. Alira, he said softly, his chin resting on top of her head. What is it? She mumbled. I checked the logs. The shot that brought the ceiling down on you, it came from your own perimeter turrets. Alira went still in his arms. She pulled back, her eyes hardening into diamond. Show me, she said. Jace nodded. The romance was gone, replaced by the cold clarity of survival. Let's go inside. We have a conspiracy to hunt. They turned and walked back into the light, leaving the view of the city behind them. They were no longer just a queen and a mechanic. They were partners, and they were at war. The dress uniform was white, stiff, and covered in enough gold braiding to strangle a horse. Jace Rowan stood in the Hall of Ancestors, tugging at the high collar that was currently cutting off blood flow to his carotid artery. Stop fidgeting, Captain Kalen rumbled from behind him. You look almost presentable. I look like a wedding cake, Jace muttered. And I feel like a target. You are a target, Kalen replied cheerfully. That is the point. The great doors of the hall groaned open, revealing the balcony overlooking the Grand Plaza. The roar of the crowd hit them like a physical wave. There were millions of them, Seraphi citizens, human expats, tourists, soldiers, packed into the capital's central square. Alira stood at the edge of the balcony. She wore the cerulean mantle, a cloak of living energy that rippled like water over her shoulders. She turned to look at Jace. Her face was composed, the mask of the queen firmly in place. But through the strange, buzzing connection in the back of his mind, Jace felt a spike of pure adrenaline. She was terrified. He stepped forward, moving to her side as they had rehearsed. He didn't bow. He didn't kneel. The ceremony of the war marriage acknowledgement required him to stand as her equal, a concept that made half the royal council look like they were chewing glass. Alira raised her hand, and the crowd fell into a hushed silence. People of the Dominion. Her voice rang out, amplified by the crystal acoustics of the towers. We live in an age of fire. The shadows lengthen. But we do not face the dark alone. She turned to Jace. She reached out and took his hand. Her grip was iron hard, trembling slightly. By the law of Ash. I have bound this warrior to the throne, she declared. He carried the crown through the flames. Now, he stands beside it, not as a servant, but as a shield, as a husband. A cheer went up, starting from the human sections of the crowd and spreading to the younger Seraphi. But Jace saw the pockets of silence, the noble houses standing with arms crossed, the cold stares of the traditionalists. Alira squeezed his hand. Jace stepped up to the microphone. He hadn't written a speech. The script the protocol droids gave him was full of flowery nonsense about eternal servitude. He ignored it. I am not a prince, Jace said, his voice rough and human compared to Alira's melodic tones. I am an engineer. I fix things that are broken. And I protect the people standing behind me. That includes your queen. He looked directly at the VIP box where Lord Vadron sat. If you are with her, you are with me. If you are against her, well, I fix problems too. The crowd roared. Alira looked at him, surprised, and he felt a flush of warmth through the bond, amusement, and something deeper. Pride. The weeks following the ceremony were a blur of governance. If Jace thought combat was exhausting, he had clearly never sat through a 10-hour session on grain tariffs. Elira, however, had a plan. She didn't just want him as a silent statue. She wanted to test him. They sat in the High Court, a circular chamber where petitioners from across the Dominion came to plead their cases. Elira sat on the sun throne. Jace sat on a smaller, but still uncomfortable, chair to her right. The petitioner was a ragged man from a border world, a human colonist named Miller. He was twisting his hat in his hands. "Your Radiance," Miller stammered. "The water filtration grid in Sector 9 has been down for 6 months. The local sci-fi governor says he cannot fix it because the parts must be blessed by the tech priests on the homeworld. We are drinking mud, ma'am. My kids are sick." Elira looked at the governor in question, a tall, haughty sci-fi named Lord Varek. "Is this true, Lord Varek?" Varek bowed smoothly. "It is a matter of protocol. Your Majesty, the filtration units are sacred technology. To repair them with unauthorized components would be spiritual pollution." Jace leaned forward. "Spiritual pollution?" Varek sneered. "The consort would not understand the intricacies of our faith." Jace turned to the petitioner. "Mr. Miller, what kind of units are they?" "Standard ionization pumps, Sergeant, Class 4. Jace turned back to Varek. "A Class 4 pump can be fixed with a bypass valve and a rubber seal. You don't need a priest. You need a wrench. You are letting people get sick because you don't want to fill out the paperwork for a non-standard repair." Varek flushed a deep purple. "This is an outrage. I will not be lectured by a—" "You will fix the pumps," Elira said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a laser. "The consort is right," she continued. "Tradition that causes suffering is not piety. It is negligence. Governor Varek, you will authorize the repairs immediately, and you, Jace." She turned to him, her eyes dancing. "You will supervise the inspection personally. Later, in the private corridor leading to their suites." Elira stopped him. "You enjoyed that," she said. "I hate bullies." Jace shrugged. "And I hate bad plumbing." Elira stepped closer. Through the bond, Jace felt a wave of complex emotion from her. Relief, validation. She had been worried he would be overwhelmed by the court. Instead, he had cut through the noise. "You see differently than we do," she said softly. "We see the law. You see the human. I need those eyes, Jace. I need you to tell me when I am blind. I'll always tell you the truth, Your Majesty, even when it's ugly. Especially when it is ugly," she whispered. The announcement of the honeymoon tour was met with cynical applause by the press and relief by the security services. Officially, it was a tour of the outer systems to celebrate the Union. Unofficially, it was a hunting trip. They boarded the royal cruiser Ethelgard, a sleek silver arrow of a ship. But instead of heading to the pleasure gardens of the core worlds, Elira ordered the navigator to set a course for the Rim. First stop, the mining moon of Cryo 7. Jace had chosen the destination. The data he had stolen from the security logs pointed to a financial trail leading here. Shell companies buying up weapon components and shipping them to nowhere. Cryo 7 was a miserable ball of ice and rock. The gravity was low, the air was thin, and the wind screamed constantly. They descended in a reinforced shuttle, landing at the primary extraction outpost. The foreman, a nervous sci-fi with a twitching eye, met them on the landing pad. "Your Radiance, consort, we were not expecting—" "Such an honor. I wanted to see the source of our wealth." Elira lied smoothly, wrapping her fur-lined cloak tighter around herself. "And my husband has an interest in heavy machinery." They toured the facility, It was grim work. Human and sci-fi miners worked side by side, cutting into the ice with laser drills to extract rare isotopes. Jace lingered behind the main group, checking the cargo manifests on a datapad he had jacked into the local network. "Something is wrong," he murmured into his comms. Alira, walking 10 feet ahead, touched her ear. "What do you see?" "Inventory," Jace replied. "They are mining 3 times the reported yield, but the export logs show normal levels. The rest is vanishing." "Where is it going?" "There is a restricted sector, North Ridge, marked as unstable terrain." Elira stopped walking. "Foreman," she said, her voice turning hard. "I wish to see the North Ridge." The foreman went pale. "Your Majesty, that is impossible. The ice is shifting and it is too dangerous. I will be the judge of danger," she said. "Prepare a transport." The transport was a heavy, tracked crawler. Jace drove, with Elira in the passenger seat and 2 of her Talon guards in the back. They rumbled out of the outpost and into the blinding white wasteland. The North Ridge was a jagged spine of ice rising against the black sky. As they approached, Jace saw it, not a landslide, but a structure, a massive hidden hangar built into the glacier. "That's not unstable terrain," Jace said grimly. "That's a warehouse." Suddenly, the proximity alarm screamed. "Incoming!" Jace yelled. A rocket, white against the snow, streaked toward them. Jace slammed the controls to the left. The crawler lurched, the treads biting into the ice. The rocket slammed into the ground where they had been a second before, exploding in a shower of superheated steam. "They know we're here!" Jace shouted. Another rocket hit the track. The crawler spun out, flipping onto its side and sliding toward a crevasse. "Out!" Jace roared. He kicked the emergency hatch open. He grabbed Alira and hauled her out into the freezing wind just as the crawler slid over the edge and plummeted into the darkness below. They were pinned down in a shallow depression in the ice. Blaster fire erupted from the ridge, chewing up the snow around them. The 2 Talon guards returned fire, their energy rifles lighting up the gloom. "We're exposed," one guard shouted. "Their shields are too strong." Jace looked up. Above them, a massive shelf of ice, loosened by the explosions, was groaning. It was about to come down. "The shield generator." Jace pointed to the portable unit on the guard's belt. "Give it to me." The guard tossed it. Jace caught the device. It was a standard infantry shield, designed to create a flat wall of energy. It wouldn't hold a falling glacier, unless... Jace whipped out his multi-tool. He ripped the casing off the generator. "What are you doing?" Alira screamed over the wind. "Improvising," Jace yelled. He shorted the limiter circuit and reversed the polarity of the emitter. Instead of a flat wall, he forced the field into a tight semicircular arc, a tunnel. The ice shelf cracked with a sound like a gunshot. Thousands of tons of frozen rock began to fall. "Get down!" Jace threw himself over Alira, slamming the modified generator into the ice beside them. He activated it. A hum of tortured electronics filled the air. A blue dome of energy sprang up over them, not a wall, but a curved roof. The avalanche hit. The world went dark. The roar was deafening. Jace felt the crushing weight of the ice pressing against the field. The generator whined, glowing hot enough to burn his gloves. He held it in place, his body covering the queen, pressing her into the snow. For 10 seconds, the universe was just noise and pressure. Then silence. Jace opened one eye. It was pitch black, save for the dying flicker of the generator. They were alive, buried, but alive. "Alira?" he gasped. "I am here." Her voice was shaky. She shifted beneath him. They were tangled together, limbs woven in a desperate embrace. Jace tapped the light on his shoulder. The beam cut through the darkness. They were in a small pocket of space carved out by the shield. Above them, the ice was packed solid. Nice engineering, Illyra breathed, staring at the curved roof of energy. I voided the warranty, Jace said, trying to laugh, but it came out as a cough. They looked at each other. They were inches apart. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a hyper-awareness of their proximity. He could feel her heart beating against his chest. He could smell the ozone scent of her skin. She started to laugh. It was a hysterical, breathless sound. We keep finding ourselves in small spaces, she said. I'm starting to think you like the danger, your majesty. She stopped laughing. Her eyes searched his face. I like that you are the one in the danger with me, she whispered. They lay there for a moment, the cold of the ice forgotten in the heat of the contact. Then, the sound of drilling came from above. Rescue, Jace said, pulling away reluctantly. That's a Talon drill. Illyra sat up, brushing snow from her hair. She looked at him, and the mask of royalty was gone completely. There was only the woman who had just realized she didn't want to let go. The rescue team dug them out and evacuated them to a secondary secure outpost, a listening station on a nearby moon. The main base on Cryo 7 was considered compromised. The listening station was small, cramped, and suffering from severe tectonic tremors caused by the gas giant it orbited. Your Majesty, the station commander apologized, sweating profusely. We have very limited quarters. The gravity stabilizers in the VIP wing are offline. It is not safe to sleep there. Where is it safe? Jace asked. The core crew quarters, the commander said. But we only have one officer's cabin available. One room, Illyra said. With one bed, the commander squeaked. Jace looked at Illyra. She looked at him. It will suffice, Illyra said. The room was a steel box with a viewport looking out at the rings of the gas giant. The bed was a narrow slab bolted to the wall. Jace locked the door. He sat on the edge of the bed and started unlacing his boots. You take the bed, he said. I'll sleep on the floor. Don't be ridiculous, Illyra said, unclasping her cloak. The floor is vibrating. You will shake apart before morning. She sat on the bed next to him. We are married. Jace, she said, her voice trying for practical but landing on nervous. We can share a mattress without causing a scandal. They lay down back to back. The bed was so small that there was no way to avoid contact. Jace could feel the line of her spine against his. He lay stiff as a board, staring at the bulkhead, trying to think about differential equations. Then, the station shuddered. A gravity tremor hit, tilting the floor 10 degrees. Illyra gasped and slid backward. Jace reacted instinctively, turning and wrapping an arm around her to keep her from rolling off. The tremor passed, but he didn't let go, and she didn't pull away. They were facing each other now in the dim light of the gas giant's rings. Her face was inches from his. Jace, she whispered, the telepathic bond. Usually a background hum, suddenly roared to life. The walls between their minds thinned. Jace felt it first, a wave of warmth that had nothing to do with the room temperature. He felt her curiosity, a hunger she had buried under layers of duty and protocol. He felt her loneliness, a deep, aching chasm that she had filled with speeches and laws. She wants me, he realized with a shock that nearly stopped his heart. Not as a guard, as a man. And then he realized she could feel him too. Illyra's eyes widened. She was feeling his struggle, the immense effort he was putting into keeping his hands respectful, the fierce protectiveness that bordered on possession, and the desire he had been suppressing since the night of the ball. You are so loud, she murmured, her hand coming up to touch his chest. Your mind, it burns. I'm sorry, Jace rasped. I'm trying to block it. Don't, she said. She moved closer. Her leg brushed against his. I have spent my whole life being what everyone else needed me to be, she confessed, her voice trembling. The symbol, the queen, the orphan. I am so tired of being alone in a room full of people. You aren't alone, Jace said. Not anymore. He reached up, his hand cupping her cheek. Her skin was soft, humming with that faint bioenergy. I was afraid, she whispered, that if I let you in, if I let myself want this, I would lose my focus, that I would fail my people. Loving someone isn't failing, Jace said. It's the only thing that keeps you sane. He ran his thumb over her lower lip. I want you. Illyra, not the queen. You. She let out a broken sound and closed the distance. Her lips were cool at first, then searing hot. It wasn't a tentative first kiss, it was a collision. The bond flared white-hot, blurring the lines between their bodies. He could feel the sensation of his own hands on her skin through her mind. It was a feedback loop of sensation that was overwhelming, terrifying, and perfect. They clung to each other as the station trembled again, an island of heat in the cold dark of space. Crack. The sound was sharp, distinct, and shattered the world. The viewport exploded inward. Jace didn't think. The combat engineer took over. He grabbed Illyra and rolled, throwing them both off the bed and onto the hard metal floor. Stay down, he screamed. A second shot punched through the wall where Illyra's head had been a second before. Sniper, Jace yelled into his comms. Sector 4, exterior breach. He dragged Illyra behind the heavy plasteel dresser. She was shaking, her eyes wide, the telepathic bond screaming with sudden panic. Jace scanned the room. The shots were coming from outside, from a ship or a drone holding position in the void. He saw something glittering on the floor, the projectile from the first shot. It had hit the heavy frame of the bed and flattened. He reached out and grabbed it. It was hot. The station alarms were blaring now. External defense turrets began to fire, lighting up the darkness outside. The sniper ship, realizing it had missed, peeled away, its engines flaring blue as it jumped to warp. Jace sat back against the dresser, pulling Illyra into his arms. Are you hit? He demanded, scanning her frantically. No, she gasped. No, I am fine. You? I'm fine. He opened his hand. He looked at the flattened bullet. It wasn't a plasma bolt. It wasn't a sci-fi energy shard. It was a kinetic slug, a chemically propelled bullet. And stamped on the base, warped but legible, was a logo, a stylized hawk gripping a lightning bolt. Ares Defense Systems, Jace whispered. Illyra looked at the bullet. That is a human corporation. One of the biggest, Jace said, his voice cold. They have the contract for the Alliance peacekeeping fleet. They are supposed to be on our side. They framed us on the station, Illyra realized, her mind racing. And now they use human weapons to try to kill me. They want it to look like a human coup. If you had died tonight, Jace said, humanity would have been blamed. The Alliance would have collapsed. The sci-fi fleets would have turned on Earth. It would be total war. And the weapons manufacturers would sell to both sides. Illyra finished. They sat there in the wreckage of the room, the freezing air from the broken window curling around them. The intimacy of the moment before was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. We cannot trust the High Command, Illyra said, and we cannot trust the human embassy. We can only trust each other, Jace said. He squeezed her hand. We are going to finish this. Illyra, we are going to find the rot, and we are going to burn it out. The investigation had to wait. The refugees could not. The ambush on the mining moon had displaced thousands of workers and their families. They were gathered in a temporary camp on the edge of the system, a collection of tents and prefabs under a gray sky. Elira refused to return to the capital immediately. She insisted on visiting the camp. Jace walked a few steps behind her. She moved through the mud, her royal robes hemmed with dirt, speaking to the families. She didn't offer empty platitudes. She listened. She touched the hands of the Seraphi elders. She nodded respectfully to the human miners. Jace watched her. He saw the way she stifled a wince when she moved. Her side was still bruised from the icefall. But she smiled for them. He wandered over to a group of children near a food distribution center. There were 3 human kids and 2 young Seraphi. They were playing a game with a ball, shouting in a mix of languages. One of the human boys tripped. A Seraphi girl, taller and lanky, reached out and hauled him up. "You okay?" she chirped in broken English. "Yeah," the boy said. He dusted himself off. Then, he did something strange. He placed his hand flat on the girl's chest, right over her heart. The Seraphi girl giggled and did the same to him. "My husband now?" she teased. "No!" the boy shouted, blushing. "Just friends." Jace smiled. It was a mimicry of the gesture Elira had used on him, the rite of the ash. But to these kids, it didn't mean ancient war debt. It meant connection. It meant I have you. Elira walked up beside him. She saw the children playing. "They are learning," she said softly. "They are watching you," Jace said. "You changed the meaning of the symbol. It used to mean debt. Now it means unity." Elira leaned against him, her shoulder pressing into his arm. It was a small, public intimacy, but after the night on the station, it felt monumental. "We are going back to Lyrian. Jace," she said. "To the snake pit, to the throne," she corrected. "We have the bullet. We have the logs from the mine. We have enough to start a fire." Jace looked at the children one last time, then at his wife. "Then let's go light a match." The great hall of the Celestial Palace was usually a place of silence and light, where the decisions of the Seraphi Dominion were made in hushed, reverent tones. Today, it felt like a cage. Queen Elira stood at the center of the obsidian floor, her voice echoing off the crystal-vaulted ceiling. She pointed a trembling finger at the holographic display floating in the center of the room. Rotating slowly in the air was a magnified image of the flattened sniper bullet Jace had pulled from the wall of their quarters on the mining station. "It is not a theory," Elira declared, her violet eyes sweeping across the circle of 12 counselors. "It is a kinetic slug manufactured by Ares Defense Systems, a human corporation with high-level contracts in the Alliance fleet. This was not a random act of piracy. It was an assassination attempt using Allied weaponry." Jace stood behind her, his hands clasped behind his back in the parade rest position. He wore his dress uniform, but he felt naked. He could feel the weight of the counselors' stares. They looked at him not as a consort, but as a contagion. Lord Vadran leaned forward on his throne. The ancient Seraphi tapped his white metal staff against the floor, a sharp, dismissive sound. "Your radiance," Vadran said, his voice smooth as oil on water. "We do not dispute the origin of the projectile. We dispute the conclusion you have drawn from it." Elira stiffened. "The conclusion is obvious. Someone in the human military-industrial complex is working with traitors within our own borders to destabilize the throne." "Or," Vadran countered, gesturing gracefully with a long, gray hand, "it is a false flag. Consider the logic. Why would a human corporation use their own identifiable ammunition to kill a queen? It is clumsy. It is theatrical. It bears the mark of radical separatists trying to frame our human allies to break the alliance." He turned his milky gaze toward Jace. Or perhaps, Vadran continued, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, it is a manipulation closer to home, a way for a human consort to prove his value, to save you from a danger that he conveniently discovered. Jace stepped forward, breaking protocol. The muscles in his jaw jumped. Are you accusing me of hiring a sniper to shoot at my own wife? Lord Vadran? Vadran did not flinch. I am merely suggesting that a simple mechanic has risen very high, very fast. And now, he presents evidence that demands we give him more authority, more access, and more trust. It is convenient, the council murmured in agreement. Jace saw the doubt taking root. They didn't want to believe their own nobility was corrupt. It was easier to blame the alien in the room. We will form a committee to study this evidence, Vadran announced, leaning back. In the meantime, the preparations for the Unity Festival will continue. We must project stability. Alyra looked at Jace. Through their bond, he felt her frustration. It was a hot, jagged spike of anger. She was the queen, yet she was powerless against the inertia of her own bureaucracy. This session is adjourned, Alyra said, her voice ice-cold. As they walked out of the hall, the heavy doors booming shut behind them. Vadran lingered in the shadows of the colonnade. He pulled a small communication device from his robes. Accelerate the timeline, he whispered into the device. The queen is becoming problematic. And remove the human. Make it look like a lover's quarrel gone wrong. Jace did not go back to the royal suite. He needed to clear his head. So he went to the only place on Lyrian that made sense to him. The lower-level hangars where the human maintenance crews worked on the atmosphere scrubbers. He was watching a mechanic calibrate a turbine when a man in a gray civilian suit stepped out from behind a stack of crates. Sergeant Rowan, the man said. Jace turned, his hand instinctively dropping to the concealed pistol at his belt. Who are you? Major Vance, Naval Intelligence, the man said, flashing a holographic ID badge. We need to talk. Off the record. Jace relaxed slightly but kept his hand near his weapon. Talk fast. You are in a bad spot. Rowan, Vance said, lighting a cigarette, a real bad spot. High Command is watching the news feeds. They see you playing dress-up with the aliens. They hear the rumors that you've gone native. I am doing my job, Jace said. I am protecting the Alliance, Vance scoffed, blowing smoke into the pristine air. You are protecting a girlfriend, and it is clouding your judgment. We have reports that you are feeding classified fleet data to the Queen, that you are prioritizing her safety over human strategic interests. That is a lie, Jace snapped. Is it? Vance stepped closer. Listen to me, son. The brass thinks you have been compromised. They think the alien witch has her claws in your brain. There is talk of a recall, an extraction team. Or, if you refuse, a tragic accident during a training exercise. Jace stared at him. You are threatening me? I am warning you, Vance hissed. You are a human being. Remember what side you are on. If you keep pushing this investigation into Ares' defense, you are going to find yourself without a country. Drop it. Go be a good little trophy husband and let the adults handle the war. Vance flicked his cigarette onto the hangar floor and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Jace stood there for a long time, staring at the smoldering butt. He crushed it under his boot. The argument started the moment Jace walked through the door of their private sanctuary. Alyra was pacing, her bioluminescence flashing a rapid, agitated teal. She held a datapad in her hand. Where were you? She demanded. My guard said you vanished into the lower levels without an escort. Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? I went for a walk, Jace said, unbuttoning his tunic. I needed to breathe air that didn't smell like incense and lies. You cannot just go for a walk, Elira snapped. You are the consort. You are a target. And when you disappear, Vadran uses it. He told the council you were likely meeting with your human handlers to sell state secrets. Maybe I should, Jace shouted, the stress of the warning from Vance boiling over. Maybe that would be easier than being treated like a traitor by your people and a traitor by mine. Elira stopped pacing. She looked at him, stunned. What did you say? Jace ran a hand through his hair. I had a visit from Naval Intelligence. They think I'm compromised. They think you are mind-controlling me. They threaten to kill me. Elira, my own people. Elira's face fell. She crossed the room, reaching out to him, but he stepped back. Don't, Jace said. Just don't. I am tired, Elira. I am tired of being the wedge that drives everyone apart. Maybe Vadran is right. Maybe I am a liability. Do not say that, Elira said, her voice fierce. You are my husband. I am a political prop, Jace yelled. I am a symbol. I am a shield. But I am barely a person anymore. I can't leave the palace. I can't talk to my friends. I am trapped in this golden cage with you, waiting for someone to blow us up. Elira flinched as if he had slapped her. The hurt radiated through the bond so intensely that Jace gasped. It tasted like ash and salt. Is that how you see me? Elira whispered. As your jailer? Jace looked at her. He saw the tears standing in her eyes. He saw the woman he had held in the dark on the mining station. The anger drained out of him, leaving only exhaustion. No, he said softly. I see you as the only thing worth dying for, and that scares the hell out of me, because I think I'm going to have to. Elira closed the distance between them. She didn't touch him with her hands. She touched him with her mind. A wave of sorrow and fierce, desperate love washed over him. We are not going to die, she said. I decoded the rest of the file from the mine. Jace looked up. You did? While you were gone, it pointed to a location, Station Omega-9. It is a neutral trade hub in the Rift sector. There is a meeting scheduled for tomorrow night. Who is meeting? The logs were encrypted with 2 keys, Elira said darkly. One Seraphi, one human. Jace felt a chill. The conspiracy. We have to go, Elira said. We can't, Jace argued. The guards, the council. You can't leave Lyrian. The queen cannot leave. Elira agreed. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. But a mercenary and his companion can slip out on a supply shuttle. Jace looked at her. He saw the fire in her eyes. It was reckless. It was stupid. It was exactly the kind of thing he would do. Omega-9 is a cesspool, Jace warned. It is full of smugglers, pirates, and slavers. Then we should fit right in, Elira said. Station Omega-9 smelled of ozone, fried synthetic meat, and desperation. It was a massive rotating wheel of rusted metal floating in the debris field of a dead star. Jace and Elira walked through the crowded bazaar of the lower ring. Jace wore a battered flight suit, a heavy blaster strapped to his thigh, and a layer of grease on his face. He looked every inch the weary gun for hire. Elira was unrecognizable. She wore a heavy hooded cloak of rough-spun wool. Around her neck was a dampener collar, a piece of illegal tech Jace had rigged to suppress her bioluminescence. Her skin looked pale and matte, stripping her of her celestial glow. She moved with a practiced slouch, hiding her regal posture. Keep your head down, Jace muttered, pulling her closer as a group of rowdy reptilian miners pushed past them. And stop walking like you own the hallway. I am trying, Elira hissed back, but this floor is sticky. Why is it sticky? Don't ask questions you don't want the answer to, Jace said. They passed a stall selling questionable meat on sticks. Jace grabbed a skewer and took a bite, casually checking the tracking device in his palm. The signal is coming from the red sector, he said, the warehouse district. They moved deeper into the station. The crowds thinned, replaced by shadows and the flicker of failing neon signs. To maintain their cover, Jace draped his arm around Alira's shoulders. It was meant to be a casual, possessive gesture, a mercenary claiming his woman. But the moment his hand touched her arm, the dynamic shifted. Alira leaned into him. It wasn't just for the act. He felt her anxiety through the bond, muffled by the dampener but still present. She was out of her element, surrounded by filth and danger, and he was her only anchor. "You are enjoying this," she murmured, her lips brushing his ear. "What? The sticky floors? The anonymity," she said. "No one knows who we are. For the first time in my life, I am just a face in the crowd, and I'm just a guy with a gun." Jace agreed. "It's nice." He pulled her tighter, his hand sliding down to rest on her hip. It was a bold move, one he would never dare in the palace. Alira didn't pull away. She pressed her hand over his, her fingers interlacing with his own. The air between them grew heavy, charged with a tension that had nothing to do with the mission. They were playing a role, lovers on the run, but the mask was slipping. "Hey, sweetheart," Jace drawled, loudly enough for a passing guard to hear. "How about we spend the credits on a room instead of ammo next time?" Alira looked up at him. The hood shadowed her eyes, but he saw the flash of amusement and heat. "Only if you promise to be worth the money." "Gunner," she shot back, her voice dropping an octave into a smoky purr. Jace stumbled slightly. He hadn't expected her to improvise that well. He cleared his throat, hiding a grin. "Focus. Your Majesty," he whispered. "You're going to give me a heart attack." "We are here," she whispered back, nodding toward a heavy blast door guarded by 2 automated sentry turrets. Jace scanned the door. Electronic lock. High grade. "Cover me," he said. He knelt by the panel, pulling out his multi-tool. Alira stood with her back to him, watching the corridor, her hand resting on the hidden stun baton beneath her cloak. "Got it," Jace clicked. The door hissed open. They slipped inside. The warehouse was cavernous, filled with shipping containers. But in the center, a portable suppression field had been set up, creating a soundproof bubble around a conference table. Jace and Alira climbed a stack of crates, lying flat on the dusty metal to look down. Jace pulled out a long-range listening device and aimed it at the group below. There were 6 people, 3 humans in expensive suits, 2 Seraphi in dark robes, and Lord Vadran. Jace adjusted the gain on the microphone. The voices fed into his earpiece, and he shared the audio feed with Alira. "Timeline is unacceptable," a human woman was saying. She was sharp-featured, cold. Jace recognized her, Director Krell of Ares Defense. "We cannot move faster," Vadran replied. "The Queen has become unpredictable. The human consort has given her a backbone she previously lacked." "Then break it," Krell snapped. "The demonstration is set for 2 days from now. Sector 7 Transport Hub. We detonate the payload during rush hour. 4,000 civilian casualties. We plant Seraphi radical manifestos at the site. The Alliance will demand blood. The war starts by Tuesday." Jace felt Alira freeze beside him. 4,000 people. A staged massacre to kickstart a galactic war for profit. "The payload is already en route?" a Seraphi conspirator asked. "It is on the station," Krell said. "In the lower bay. My ship, the Iron Hawk, will transport it to the target zone." "We have what we need," Jace whispered. "We have the confession. We have the plan." Let's get out of here and transmit this to the fleet. He started to inch backward. His boots scraped against a loose bolt. It was a tiny sound, a metallic scritch. But in the silence of the warehouse, it was a thunderclap. Below them, Vadran's head snapped up. His milky eyes seemed to pierce right through the gloom. "We have guests," Vadran announced calmly. "Kill them." The warehouse erupted. The mercenaries standing in the shadows opened fire. Plasma bolts and kinetic slugs tore into the crates Jace and Illyra were using for cover. "Move!" Jace roared. He grabbed Illyra and leaped from the stack, firing his blaster in midair. He hit a mercenary in the chest, dropping him. They landed in a roll behind a forklift. Jace pulled a handful of micro-grenades from his belt. "Close your eyes," he yelled. He tossed the grenades. Flashbangs. A blinding white light filled the room, accompanied by a deafening bang. Illyra didn't just cover her eyes. She reached out with her mind. Jace felt the surge of power. It was like standing next to a lightning strike. Confusion. She projected. Terror. The mercenaries screamed. They started firing wildly at empty air, shouting about shadow monsters and phantom flames. Illyra was projecting hallucinations directly into their cortices. "Go!" Illyra gasped, blood beginning to trickle from her nose. The dampener collar was fighting her, burning her skin as she pushed her power through it. Jace grabbed her arm and they sprinted for the rear exit. A bolt clipped Jace's sleeve, singing his arm. He returned fire, dropping another guard. They burst out into the corridor. Alarms were blaring throughout the station now. "Security alert!" The computerized voice droned. "Hull breach imminent. Self-destruct sequence initiated in Sector Red." "They're blowing the sector!" Jace shouted. "They're going to bury the evidence and us with it." They ran. The station shook violently. Explosions began to ripple through the floor, tearing the metal plating apart. Fire roared down the hallways behind them. "The airlock," Illyra pointed. They reached the dock where they had bribed a pilot to wait. The pilot was gone. The dock was empty, except for a sleek, unmarked Ares Defense Interceptor, likely Krell's personal escape craft. "We're taking that," Jace said. He blew the hatch with a shaped charge. They scrambled into the cockpit. It was advanced, all touchscreens and neural interfaces. "Can you fly this?" Illyra asked. "Strapping in." "It's human tech," Jace grunted, his fingers flying across the console. "I can fly a brick if it has thrusters." The hangar bay doors began to close. The station was collapsing around them. "Hold on." Jace punched the throttle. The interceptor shot forward. He didn't wait for the doors to open fully. He aimed for the narrowing gap. The ship screamed as it scraped through, sparks showering the windshield. They burst out into the black void of space just as Station Omega-9 dissolved into a blossoming flower of fire and debris. The shockwave hit them, sending the small ship tumbling end over end. Jace fought the controls, wrestling the ship into stability. "Stabilizers online," he gasped. "We're clear." He looked at the comms panel. It was lighting up with emergency broadcasts. "Alert! Alert! Terrorist attack on Station Omega-9 confirmed. Suspects identified. Queen Illyra Saith and consort Jace Rowan. Kill on sight. Repeat, kill on sight." Jace stared at the screen. "They framed us. They blew up the station to hide the meeting and pinned it on us." Illyra was silent. She was staring out at the debris field, her face pale, the blood from her nose stark against her skin. "We are traitors," she whispered. "We have nowhere to go." Jace engaged the warp drive, punching in random coordinates. He just needed to get them away. The stars stretched into lines of light, and the ship jumped. The silence in the cockpit was heavy. The only sound was the hum of the reactor and their own ragged breathing. Jace unbuckled his harness. He turned to Illyra. She was shaking, not from fear but from the aftershocks of using her power and the adrenaline crash. Let me see, Jace said gently. He reached for the dampener collar around her neck. It was fused shut, hot to the touch. He used his multi-tool to pry it open. It clicked off, and she gasped as it fell away. Her skin was red and blistered where the metal had touched her. I'm sorry, Jace said, his voice thick with emotion. I dragged you into this. I dragged you into the mud and the fire. Illyra looked at him. Her eyes were wild. You didn't drag me. Jace, I chose to come. She grabbed his hands. Her grip was desperate. Do you regret it? She demanded. What? The bond? Me? Do you regret that I ruined your life? That I turned you into a fugitive? Jace looked at her. He saw the doubt eating her alive. She thought she had destroyed him. He laughed. It was a dry, broken sound. Regret it? Illyra, look at me. He leaned forward, his face inches from hers. I am terrified. I have every government in the galaxy hunting me. I have no rank, no home, and probably no future. He freed one hand and cupped the back of her neck, his thumb brushing the sensitive skin behind her ear. But I have never felt more alive than I do right now. I don't regret the bond. I regret that it took a war for me to realize how much I love you. Illyra stopped breathing. You love me? Jace rested his forehead against hers. I love you so much it hurts. I love you enough to burn the whole galaxy down if they try to touch you. Illyra let out a sob. It was a sound of pure release. The walls she had built, the queen, the politician, the stoic leader, crumbled. Jace, she whispered. She kissed him. It wasn't like the kiss in the bedroom on the mining station. That had been curiosity and heat. This was different. This was desperate. This was two people standing on the edge of a cliff and choosing to jump together. Her lips were soft, tasting of salt and copper. Jace groaned, pulling her out of the co-pilot seat and into his lap. She straddled him, her arms locking around his neck, burying her hands in his hair. The telepathic bond exploded wide open. There were no barriers now. Jace felt her soul wrap around his. He felt her overwhelming love, her fierce need, her absolute trust. And she felt his protective rage, his adoration, his surrender. They kissed until they were breathless, until the lines between them blurred. Jace pulled back, gasping, his hands resting on her waist. He looked into her violet eyes and saw his own reflection. We have to stop, he whispered, his voice shaking. Why? She challenged, leaning back in to nip at his jaw. We are alone. We are outlaws. Who is going to stop us? Jace closed his eyes, resting his head back against the seat. Because, he said, forcing the words out, if we do this now, here, while we are running for our lives, it will be just another desperate reaction, another panic response. He opened his eyes and looked at her with intense seriousness. I want you. Illyra. God, I want you. But I want to do it when you aren't bleeding. I want to do it when we are safe. I want it to be a choice, not an escape. Illyra stared at him. Her chest was heaving. Slowly, the wildness faded from her eyes, replaced by a deep, glowing tenderness. You are a stubborn man, Jace Rowan, she whispered, smoothing the hair back from his forehead. I'm an engineer, he said, managing a weak smile. I like to build things on a solid foundation. She leaned forward and kissed him gently on the forehead. Okay, she said. We wait. But Jace? Yeah? When we win this, when we are safe, yeah? I am going to ravage you. Jace laughed, a genuine sound of joy in the cramped cockpit. I'll mark it on the calendar. He turned back to the console. The nav computer beeped. Where are we? Alira asked, settling back into her seat, though she kept her hand resting on his knee. Nowhere, Jace said, looking at the star charts. I jumped us into the Veil Nebula. Uncharted lanes. The sensors can't track us here. So we are ghosts, Alira said. For now, Jace said. He engaged the sublight engines, guiding the ship into the swirling purple mists of the nebula. But ghosts can haunt people, Alira said, her voice turning hard again. And Vadran has a lot to answer for. We need allies, Jace said. We can't go to the army and we can't go to the palace. Who is left? Alira looked out at the stars. The people, she said. We go to the people who have been forgotten. The veterans, the colonists, the ones who know what real war looks like. Jace nodded. He put his hand over hers on his knee. Then let's go start a revolution. The small ship vanished into the mist, leaving the burning wreckage of their old lives behind. They were no longer queen and consort. They were Alira and Jace, and they were just getting started. The moon of Oakhaven was a forgotten speck on the edge of the Veil Nebula, a world of rolling purple hills and copper-colored forests where the Empire's reach was long and thin. It was a place where old soldiers went to die and young dreamers went to hide. For the last 10 days, it had been home to 2 fugitives known simply as Ale and Jay. Jace Rowan stood knee-deep in a muddy irrigation ditch, wrestling with a hydro pump that looked like it predated the invention of the wheel. He wiped sweat from his forehead with a forearm that was smeared with blue clay. Piece of junk, Jace muttered, giving the casing a percussive maintenance tap with a wrench. From the porch of the small, weathered farmhouse, a laugh drifted down. It was a sound that had become more frequent in the last week. Lighter, freer than the bell-like chime he was used to hearing in the palace. Do not insult the machinery. Jay, Alira called out. She was sitting on a wooden bench, shucking a basket of native podcorn. She wore a rough-spun tunic and trousers borrowed from the village weaver, her hair tied back in a messy braid. Without the bioluminescent dampener, her skin had returned to its natural, soft glow. But here, under the hazy amber sun, it looked less like royal radiance and more like she had swallowed the dawn. It is not machinery, Jace called back. It is a collection of rust held together by hope and stubbornness. It reminds me of you, she teased. Jace snorted, finally wrenching the valve open. Water gushed into the field, feeding the rows of singing tubers that hummed a low, vibrating note as they drank. He waded out of the ditch and walked up the hill. The village of High Hollow was a strange, beautiful hybrid. Human prefabs sat next to grown Seraphi crystal tree homes. In the evenings, you could hear bluegrass guitar mixing with the haunting flute music of the tall folk. Jace sat on the step next to Alira. He took a pod from her basket and cracked it open. How are your hands? He asked quietly. Alira looked at her palms. The blisters from the dampener collar were healing, turning from angry red to a faint silvery pink. Better, she said. Elder Kale gave me a salve made from the copper moss. He says it draws out the heat. Elder Kale was the de facto leader of the community, a Seraphi veteran of the First Contact Wars who had lost an arm and gained a deep, cynical wisdom. He knew who they were. It was hard to miss the resemblance to the Queen on every credit chip, but he hadn't said a word. To him, they were just 2 young people in trouble. He told me something this morning, Jace said, tossing a husk to the ground. He said empires rot from the heart outward. He said by the time you see the mold on the border, the core is already dead. He is not wrong, Alira said, her face clouding. We let Vadran and the corporations build a nest in the throne room. We were so busy looking at the stars we forgot to look at the floorboards. Hey, Jace said, bumping her shoulder with his no politics before dinner. That was the rule. Illyra smiled, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. Right. The rule. Speaking of dinner, I am attempting the stew again. Jace feigned a look of terror. The human stew? The one with the spices? I believe I have mastered the ratio of salt to not salt this time, she said with mock dignity. God help us. Jace grinned. The stew was, in fact, edible. Barely. But they ate it with gusto, sitting at the small wooden table in the center of the one-room cabin the village had lent them. Night had fallen, and the temperature dropped rapidly on Oakhaven. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls. After dinner, they sat on the rug before the fire. It had become a ritual, no speeches, no protocols. Just two people trying to remember what it felt like to be safe. Illyra reached out and took Jace's hand. Her fingers traced the white, jagged line of the scar that ran from his knuckles to his wrist. Shrapnel? She asked softly. Plasma burn, Jace corrected. Siege of Tarex. I was fixing a shield generator when a mortar hit. The heat fused the wrench to my glove. Illyra flinched, as if she could feel the phantom pain through their bond. She brought his hand to her lips and kissed the scar. And this one? She asked, touching the faded line on his jaw. Bar fight, Jace chuckled. Moon of Titan. A guy said engineers were just glorified janitors. I disagreed. She smiled, tracing the line of his jaw with a reverence that made his breath catch. You have so many maps on your skin. Jay. And you? Jace asked. He reached out and gently touched the faint lightning bolt patterns etched into her shoulder. Not natural markings, but scars from psychic backlash. The coronation, Illyra whispered. The crown of light is not just jewelry. It is a psychic amplifier. When they put it on me, I was 14. The surge nearly burned my nervous system out. I couldn't speak for 3 days. Jace's thumb brushed the mark. They hurt you to make you a queen. It is the price, she said. To lead is to burn. Jace looked at her. The firelight caught the gold flecks in her violet eyes. The bond between them, usually a hum, began to thrum with a deeper resonance. It wasn't the frantic, adrenaline-fueled connection of the escape. It was slow, deep, and heavy like a tide coming in. You aren't burning now, Jace said hoarsely. No, she breathed. I am warm. She moved closer. The distance between them vanished. Jace could smell the scent of the copper moss and the wood smoke in her hair. He could feel the heat of her body radiating through the thin tunic. We are just Ale and Jay here, she whispered, her hand moving to the back of his neck, her fingers tangling in his hair. No crowns, no titles, just us. Jace looked at her, searching for any sign of hesitation. He found none. He found only a naked, aching need that mirrored his own, just us. He agreed. He leaned in and kissed her. It was slow, deliberate, a question asked and answered in the silence of the room. Illyra made a soft sound in her throat and pressed herself against him, her weight knocking him back onto the thick rug. They moved with a desperate, clumsy tenderness. Hands fumbled with ties and buttons. Skin met skin, shocked by the contact, then greedy for it. When Jace ran his hands down the curve of her spine, tracing the bioluminescent markings that flared brilliantly at his touch, Illyra gasped, arching into him. You are beautiful, Jace whispered against her throat. Not because you are a queen, because you are you. Illyra pulled him down to her, wrapping her legs around him, anchoring him to the earth. Through the bond, Jace felt her walls come down completely. There was no fear tonight. There was only a profound sense of coming home. They came together in the firelight, the act stripping away the last of the barriers between two species, two worlds. It was a reclaiming, in a galaxy that wanted to turn them into symbols, into martyrs, into weapons. They chose to be simply a man and a woman, holding on to each other against the dark. Later, as the fire burned down to embers, they lay tangled under a heavy wool blanket. Elira's head rested on Jace's chest, her breathing syncing with his heartbeat. "Jace," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep. "Yeah? I used to think strength was standing alone, like a tower. And now? Now I think strength is knowing who will catch you when the tower falls." Jace kissed the top of her head. "I've got you. Ale. Always." The peace broke 2 days later. Jace was helping Miller, the human veteran, repair a solar array when a young sci-fi boy ran up the hill, waving a data pad. "Jay! Ale! You have to see this." Jace took the pad. Elira came out of the cabin, drying her hands on a cloth. She looked at Jace's face and went still. "What is it?" "News from the capital," Jace said grimly. He tapped the screen. The holographic projection sprang to life. It was Lord Vadran. He was wearing the heavy black robes of a regent. He stood on the balcony where Elira had announced their marriage. "Tragic loss," Vadran intoned, his face a mask of sorrow. "We have confirmed that her radiance was under the influence of potent psychotropic drugs administered by the human traitor, Jace Rowan. Under this chemical thrall, she was abducted. We fear the worst." Elira made a noise of disgust. "He makes me sound like a victim, a puppet," Vadran continued. "Until the Queen is found and purified, I assume the mantle of regent. To ensure our security, I am declaring martial law in the outer sectors. And to demonstrate our resolve against the terrorists hiding in our midst, the new planetary defense cannon will undergo a live fire test over the colony of New Hope within 48 hours. "New Hope," Jace said, his blood running cold. "That's a dissident colony. It's filled with refugees. He is going to wipe it off the map," Elira said, her voice trembling with rage. "He is going to murder 1 million people and claim it was a test." She looked at Jace. The soft, domestic peace of the last week evaporated. The Queen was back. "We have to stop him." "How?" Jace asked. "We have a stolen shuttle and a blaster pistol. That cannon is shielded by a fleet. We have the truth," Elira said. "And we have friends." She turned to Elder Kale, who had walked up behind them. "Elder," she said, "you told me you used to be a comms officer in the Rim War." "I was," Kale grunted. "Do you still know how to override a military frequency?" Kale smiled, exposing a gold tooth. "Your Majesty, asking a comms officer if he can hack a signal is like asking a fish if it can swim. It is just a matter of having a big enough antenna." Jace looked at the massive rusted solar array they had been fixing. He looked at Miller. "Miller," Jace said, "you think we can boost the output of this array? Turn it into a deep space transmitter?" Miller spat on the ground. "Sergeant, give me a hydro spanner and a bottle of whiskey, and I can talk to God." They worked through the night. The village mobilized. The tech-savvy youth brought spare parts. The veterans brought old batteries and unauthorized decoders. Jace and Miller rewired the entire grid of the settlement, channeling every ounce of power into the single transmitter. It was dawn when they were ready. The camera was a drone salvaged from a scrap heap. Elira stood in front of the array. She wore her simple tunic, but someone had brought her a cloak of deep red wool. She looked regal, not because of jewels, but because of the fire in her eyes. "We are ready," Jace said, standing behind the console. "We can only hold the signal for 3 minutes before they triangulate us." Make it count. Elira nodded. She reached out and took Jace's hand. Stand with me, she said. But, no buts. They need to see us together. Jace stepped into the frame. He held her hand tight, transmitting in 3, 2, 1. The red light on the drone blinked. Citizens of the Dominion. Elira began. Her voice was not the amplified boom of the palace. It was intimate, urgent. It was the voice of the woman who had sat by the fire. I am Elira Saith, and I am not missing. I am not drugged, and I am certainly not a victim. She squeezed Jace's hand, lifting their interlaced fingers into the frame. I am here with my husband, Jace Rowan, the man Lord Vadran calls a traitor, the man who saved my life, the man I chose of my own free will to bind my soul to. She looked directly into the lens. You are being lied to. The war they are trying to start is a forgery. It is a business transaction between corrupt men who view your lives as currency. We have the evidence. We are uploading the logs from the Ares conspiracy now. Read them. See the names. See the prices they put on your children. The signal began to degrade. Static clawed at the edges of the frame. They want you to hate, Elira said fiercely. They want you to fear. Because when you fear, you obey. Do not obey. Look at the person standing next to you, human or seraphi. If they bleed, they are your kin. If they hope, they are your ally. Vadran threatens New Hope with fire. I say to the fleets in orbit, do not fire. Do not be butchers for a usurper. I am coming home, and I am bringing the storm with me. Jace cut the feed. The transmitter sparked and died, the capacitors blown. Silence hung over the hillside. Then, Miller's comm unit chirped. Then Kale's. Then every device in the village. It wasn't a military channel. It was the civilian band. This is the freighter Starlight. We hear you, Your Majesty. This is Mining Colony 4. We are standing by. This is Captain Harlan of the destroyer Vanguard. We are reading the logs. My God, they sold us out. Jace looked at Elira. She was trembling. You did it, he said. Elira looked up at the sky. We bought a chance, she said. Now we have to fight for it. The fleet that assembled at the edge of the Lyrian system was the ugliest thing Jace had ever seen. It was a chaotic swarm of mining barges, retrofitted freighters, private yachts, and 3 defecting destroyers from the border fleets. At the lead was the Iron Hawk, the stolen Ares interceptor with Jace at the controls and Elira in the co-pilot seat. The capital world hung before them, a jewel of violet and green. But orbiting it was the blockade, hundreds of loyalist warships, and the dark, menacing shape of the superweapon platform, a massive ring of steel focused on the planet below. They aren't aiming at New Hope anymore, Jace observed, reading the sensors. They spun the weapon. It's aiming at the capital. It's the failsafe, Elira said, her face pale. If Vadran can't rule it, he will burn it. He is holding the entire city hostage. Incoming hail, Jace said. It's the blockade flagship. A holographic face appeared. It was Admiral Thorn, a human commander. Sergeant Rowan, Thorn said stiffly. Your Radiance. We have received your data. The logs are damning. Then stand down. Admiral, Jace said. Let us pass. I cannot do that, Thorn said. Vadran has control of the defense grid. He has locked the weapons firing solution on the Palace district. He says if any ship crosses the perimeter, he fires. Millions will die. Jace looked at the schematic of the weapon. It was an energy lens, magnifying the planet's own magnetic field into a destructive beam. It required massive power relays on the surface to function. Admiral, Jace said. If the ground relays are cut, the weapon can't fire. It will overload in orbit. The relays are inside the palace defense hub, Thorn said. It is a fortress. Illyra unbuckled her harness. We don't need to break in, she said. We just need to open the door. She looked at Jace. Get me close, she said. To the weapon, to the planet. I need to be in range of the garrison. Jace nodded. He opened a channel to the ragtag fleet. This is Rowan. All ships. Focus fire on Sector 4 of the blockade. We are punching a hole. Admiral Thorn, if you are a patriot, you will look the other way. Thorn paused. Then, the flagship began to drift to port, opening a gap in the line. Good luck. Sergeant, punch it, Jace yelled. The Iron Hawk screamed forward. The blockade erupted into chaos. Green plasma and red lasers stitched the void. The rebel ships took heavy fire, screening the Queen's approach. Jace wove the interceptor through the flak, diving into the atmosphere. The sky turned from black to blue to scorching orange as re-entry heat took hold. Illyra closed her eyes. She reached out with her mind. Not a gentle touch this time, but a hammer blow. Soldiers of the Talon Guard. Her mental voice boomed across the psychic plane. This is your queen. The usurper holds a knife to the throat of our home. Rise, break the chains, take the relays, on the ground, in the fortified bunkers of the capital. Chaos erupted. Guards loyal to the conspiracy suddenly found themselves fighting their own squad mates who had woken up from Vadran's lies. We are through, Jace shouted, pulling the ship out of the dive. Below them, the city was a war zone. Smoke rose from the government district. The weapon is charging, Illyra shouted, clutching her head. I can feel the buildup. Vadran is pushing the sequence. I'm dropping us at the central tower, Jace said. That's the control node. The tower was under heavy fire. Jace flared the thrusters, bringing the ship into a hovering crash landing on the upper landing pad. The landing gear sheared off, screeching sparks across the deck. They blew the hatch and ran. The corridors of the palace were a nightmare. Bodies of loyalists and traitors littered the floor. The air smelled of ozone and death. They reached the central control room. The door was blasted open. Inside, Lord Vadran stood by the main console. He was manic, his eyes wild. The room was crackling with energy, the fail-safe overload already beginning. You! Vadran screamed, pointing his staff. You ruin everything! He fired a bolt of energy. Jace tackled Illyra, the bolt scorching the wall where they had stood. Jace came up firing. His blaster bolt hit Vadran's personal shield, flaring blue. Vadran laughed. It is too late. The core is locked. The city burns with me. He smashed his hand down on the manual override. The floor buckled. An explosion ripped through the lower levels of the tower. The energy grid began to feed back, blowing out consoles. Illyra scrambled to her feet. She didn't run for cover. She ran for the conduit. She grabbed the manual stabilizers, her hands glowing with power. She wasn't just using technology. She was using her own bioenergy to bridge the broken circuits, trying to vent the weapon's buildup into the upper atmosphere. Illyra! Stop! Jace yelled. It will kill you! I have to hold it, she screamed, her voice distorted by the energy field. Go, Jace! Get out! Jace looked at Vadran, who was cackling as the room fell apart around him. No! Jace growled. He sprinted across the room. He didn't shoot. He used his body as a battering ram. He hit Vadran with the force of a freight train, driving the old Seraphai backward. They crashed through the transparasteel window. Vadran screamed as he fell into the burning city below. Jace caught the edge of the window frame, hanging over the abyss. He pulled himself up, muscles screaming. The room was an inferno. The ceiling was collapsing. Illyra was at the console, her back arched in agony, the energy arcing through her body. She was channeling the power of a star through her veins. Jace ran to her. The heat was unbearable. His uniform began to smoke. "Let go," he roared. "I can't." She gasped. "If I let go, everyone dies." Jace saw the engineering panel, the manual vent. It was jammed. He grabbed a heavy piece of debris, a statue of a past king, and smashed it into the vent release. Once, twice, 3 times. The metal sheared. The vent slammed open. The energy roared upward, shooting a beam of pure white light into the sky, bypassing the city and dissipating harmlessly into space. The backlash hit the room. Elira collapsed. Jace shielded her with his body as the roof came down. Darkness. Then, heat. Jace coughed. The air was thick with dust. He pushed a slab of concrete off his legs. Elira? She was lying beside him, and she was unconscious. Her skin was gray, the light gone. She was breathing, but shallowly. Psychic burnout. Jace looked around. The tower was gone. They were in a pocket of ruin, fire licking at the edges. He had been here before. Part 1. He wheezed, a bloody smile touching his lips. Rerun. He checked her. No broken bones, but she was completely drained. She couldn't walk. He stood up. His leg gave way, sending a spike of agony up his hip. He forced himself to stand. "Come on, Your Majesty," he whispered. One more time. He bent down and lifted her. She was dead weight. He groaned, the sound tearing from his throat. He began to walk, through the fire, through the smoke, through the twisting metal that groaned like a dying beast. He didn't think about politics. He didn't think about the future. He thought about one step, then the next. He reached the remains of the grand bridge connecting the tower to the safe zone. It was swaying, half the supports gone. Below, the fires of the battle raged. There were people on the other side, soldiers, civilians, medics. They stopped their fighting, staring at the figure emerging from the inferno. Jace stumbled. He fell to one knee. "Get up," he told himself. "You promised to catch her." He stood. He crossed the bridge. As he reached the safety of the plaza, he collapsed. He went down to his knees, but he didn't drop her. He held her cradled against his chest. Elira's eyes fluttered open. She looked up at the soot-stained face of her husband. She saw the crowd gathering around them in stunned silence. She struggled to lift her head. She grabbed his tunic. "Listen to me," she rasped, her voice cutting through the silence. She pointed a shaking hand at Jace. "Remember this." She looked at the Seraphi guards. She looked at the human soldiers. "He carried your queen through the flames of battle." She pressed her hand to his chest, leaving a bloody print over his heart. "He is my husband. Now and forever." The silence held for one heartbeat, then two. Then, a human soldier threw his helmet in the air and cheered. A Seraphi guard slammed his spear against his shield. The roar began to build, swelling like a wave, rolling over the burning city. It wasn't a cheer for a treaty. It wasn't a cheer for an alliance. It was a cheer for them. Jace looked down at her. He was exhausted. He was bleeding. He was probably going to need a new hip. "You have a flair for the dramatic, ill," he whispered. Elira smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder as the medics rushed in. "I learned it from you, Jay." Then, the darkness took them both, but this time they weren't afraid of it. They went into it together. The medical triage unit in the Grand Plaza was a chaotic sea of shouting voices, sizzling cauterizers, and the smell of ozone. Jace Rowan sat on a supply crate, a medic wrapping a biosynthetic bandage around his left calf. His uniform was shredded, his face smeared with soot, and he was fairly certain he had cracked 2 ribs. Beside him, Queen Illyra Sath refused to sit. She leaned heavily against a marble pillar, receiving a transfusion of blue nutrient fluid directly into her arm. Her gown was ruined, scorched black at the hem, but she wore the dirt like battle armor. "Look at them," she whispered, pointing toward the avenue. Jace followed her gaze. The Seraphi capital, usually a place of silent, regimented order, was alive with a messy, beautiful resistance. It was not just the soldiers. Shopkeepers, mechanics, and artists were pouring into the streets. Jace saw a towering Seraphi dockworker using a heavy cargo lifter to flip a traitorous tank onto its side. He saw a human bistro owner throwing jagged pieces of crystal pavement at a drone, while a Seraphi child shielded them both with a small, flickering energy barrier. "They are not waiting for orders," Jace said, feeling a lump form in his throat. "They are just fighting for their homes." A scout from the Loyalist Talon Guard sprinted up to them, skidding to a halt on the bloody stones. "Your Radiance." "Commander, the relay tower is down, but we have a problem. The energy feedback did not dissipate. It is being drawn back into the primary grid." "What?" Illyra stiffened, pulling the transfusion needle from her arm with a hiss of pain. "That is impossible. We vented it. Lord Vadran has overridden the safety protocols from the throne hall," the scout reported, breathless. "He has retreated to the inner sanctum with Admiral Thorn. They are pulling all the residual energy into the superweapons core. They are not trying to fire a beam anymore. They are turning the core into a bomb." Jace looked at the sky. The ring of the weapon station orbiting above was glowing a terrifying, unstable white. "If that core cracks," Jace said grimly, "it won't just burn the city, it will crack the planet's crust. It's a suicide pact." "How long?" Illyra demanded. 20 minutes, at best," the scout replied. "The throne hall is sealed, Class 10 shields. We cannot breach it with standard weapons." Illyra looked at Jace. The exhaustion in her eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, diamond-hard resolve. "We do not need standard weapons," she said. "We have an engineer." Jace stood up, testing his weight on his bad leg. He grabbed his rifle from the ground. "Get me to the door," he said. "I will knock." The path to the throne hall was a gauntlet. Jace and Illyra moved at the center of a wedge formation, flanked by the remnants of the Talon Guard and a squad of human marines who had defected from Thorn's command. They fought room by room, corridor by corridor. It was brutal, close-quarters combat. Jace used his multi-tool to hotwire blast doors while Illyra used short, sharp pulses of telepathic force to disorient enemy heavy gunners. They reached the great antechamber. The massive doors of the throne hall stood before them, shimmering with a gold energy field that hummed with lethal power. "It is a harmonic barrier," Jace yelled over the sound of plasma fire coming from the rear guard. "If we touch it, it vaporizes us. I need to disrupt the frequency." "Do it!" Illyra shouted, raising a physical shield of hard light to deflect a sniper shot. Jace ran to the control panel. He ripped the cover off. It was complex alien circuitry, far beyond standard human tech. But physics was physics. He jammed a bypass chip into the slot and started rapidly keying in a dissonant algorithm. "Come on," he muttered, sweat stinging his eyes. The barrier flickered. It turned from gold to red. "Now!" Jace roared. A Seraphi heavy trooper fired a rocket at the door. The explosion shattered the weakened field and blew the massive doors off their hinges. Smoke billowed. Jace and Illyra stepped through the breach, weapons raised. The throne hall was vast, dominated by the floating crown, a massive holographic projection of the Dominion's seal above the dais. Beneath it stood Lord Vadran, and a human man in a pristine white naval uniform. Admiral Thorn. They were surrounded by a ring of automated defense turrets and a dozen elite mercenaries in stealth suits. It is over, Vadran! Illyra's voice boomed, magnified by the acoustics of the room. Step away from the console. Vadran turned. He looked deranged. His robes were torn, his milky eyes wide with the mania of a man who had lost everything but his hate. Over? Vadran cackled. It is only beginning, little girl. You have brought the mongrels into the sacred hall. You have let the dirt stain the floor. He gestured to the console behind him. A countdown timer hovered in the air. 6 minutes. I am cleansing it, Vadran hissed. Fire is the only purity left. Admiral Thorne stepped forward, looking nervous. He held a detonator in his hand. Stay back, Sergeant, Thorne warned, his voice shaking. We have the codes. We can detonate early. You are a coward, Thorne, Jace said, stepping forward slowly, his hands held out to show he wasn't reaching for a weapon. You are going to die for a paycheck? For a title? Look at him. Vadran doesn't care if you survive. He wants to be a martyr. Silence the pet, Vadran shrieked. He looked at Illyra with pure venom. Look at you, Vadran sneered. A queen who couples with a primate. You have doomed our race. You have bound yourself to a weakling, a creature of mud and short years. What can he possibly offer the Dominion? He is nothing. Illyra's hand tightened on her sword, but Jace put a hand on her arm. He stepped past her. You are right, Jace said quietly. His voice carried through the silent hall. I am weak. I break easily. I bleed. I am scared most of the time. He looked Vadran in the eye. But that is why we survive. Because we know what it is like to hurt. Jace took another step. The mercenaries raised their rifles. When I found her in the fire, Jace said, pointing back at Illyra, she didn't demand I save her because she was a queen. She was terrified, and because she felt fear, she understood mine. She didn't look away. Jace's voice grew harder. You talk about purity, Vadran, you talk about strength. But an empire that cannot feel the pain of its smallest citizen is already dead. It is just a corpse waiting to fall down. Compassion isn't a weakness. It is the only reason you are still breathing right now. Vadran's face twisted. Kill them, he screamed. Kill them all. The mercenaries opened fire. Illyra didn't raise a shield. She stepped forward and grabbed Jace's hand. Together, she projected into his mind. The bond slammed open. It wasn't a trickle. It was a floodgate. Illyra pushed her power outward, not as a blast of force, but as a broadcast. She pulled Jace into the center of her mind, grabbing his memories, his emotions, and weaving them with her own. Show them, she commanded. The room erupted in psychic light. Every person in the hall, Vadran, Thorne, the mercenaries, was suddenly hit with a tidal wave of sensory experience. They felt the scorching heat of the corridor in Part 1. They felt the crushing weight of the ice on the mining moon. They felt the taste of the stew in the village. They felt the terror of the sniper shot. And they felt the overwhelming, blinding love that Jace and Illyra held for each other. A love that was protective, fierce, and absolute. The mercenaries staggered, dropping their weapons, clutching their heads as they wept, overwhelmed by the raw humanity of the projection. Admiral Thorne fell to his knees, gasping as if he had been punched. It was too much reality for men who had lived in cold abstraction. Vadran, however, was old and twisted by decades of hate. He fought the projection. He screamed, a sound of psychic feedback, and raised his staff. The tip glowed with green necrotic energy. No! Vadran roared. He fired. The bolt wasn't aimed at Jace. It was aimed at Illyra. Jace tried to move, but he was deep in the psychic link. He was a fraction of a second too slow. The green lightning struck Illyra in the chest. She made no sound. The light in her eyes simply went out. The bond in Jace's head snapped into silence. She crumpled to the floor. Elira! Jace screamed. The sound that came out of him was not human. It was the sound of a wolf watching its mate die. Jace looked at Vadran. The old Seraphi was smiling, preparing another shot. Jace didn't reach for his rifle. He reached for his belt. He grabbed a heavy-duty plasma charge, a mining explosive he had kept since the village. He pulled the pin. He didn't throw it. He sprinted. Jace Rowan, the engineer who fixed things, became a missile. He closed the distance in 3 strides. Vadran's personal shield flared up, an impenetrable wall of force. Jace slammed the plasma charge directly against the shield surface and detonated it. The explosion threw Jace backward, his armor shattering, his skin burning. But the shield overloaded instantly, collapsing in a shower of sparks. Jace rolled, ignored the agony in his chest, and launched himself at Vadran. He tackled the Regent. They hit the floor and kept moving, sliding across the polished obsidian. Jace was punching him. Savage, uncoordinated blows, screaming Elira's name with every hit. They slammed into the massive stained glass window behind the dais that looked out over a 1,000-foot drop. The glass shattered. They went over the edge. Jace felt the wind whistle past his ears. He saw the burning city below. He saw Vadran's terrified face. Jace kicked out. He drove his boot into Vadran's chest, pushing himself away. He reached out blindly. His hand caught a gargoyle on the lower ledge. The impact nearly ripped his arm from its socket. He slammed into the stone wall, gasping, dangling by one hand over the abyss. Below him, Lord Vadran screamed as he fell, a gray ragdoll tumbling into the smoke. Jace hung there for a second, sobbing for breath. Elira! He hauled himself up. He climbed over the broken sill and fell back into the throne hall. The mercenaries had fled. Thorn was cowering in the corner. Jace crawled across the floor. He left a trail of blood. He reached Elira. She was lying on her back. Her skin was gray. The bioluminescence was completely gone. She looked like a statue made of ash. "No," Jace whispered. "No, no, no, you don't get to do this. We have a deal." He pressed his hands to the wound. It was cauterized, black and ugly. He checked for a pulse. It was there, faint, thready, but there. She was alive. Jace tapped his comms. "Medic! I need a medic now!" The console behind them began to beep rapidly. "System critical," the automated voice announced. "Core destabilization imminent. 30 seconds. Jace looked at the countdown. He looked at Elira. He couldn't move her. If the core went, they were all dust anyway. Elira's eyes opened. They were dim, swimming with pain. "Jace," she whispered. "I'm here," Jace sobbed, smoothing the hair back from her face. "I'm here. Vadran is gone. The core." She gasped. "It's too late," Jace said. "I can't stop it. Help me. Up. No, you can't move. Help me," she commanded, a ghost of her royal voice returning. Jace grabbed her arms and hauled her up. She couldn't stand. She leaned her entire weight against him. She reached out a shaking hand toward the console. She didn't touch the keys. She placed her hand on the interface plate. She closed her eyes. Jace felt a flicker in his mind. The bond reconnected. It was weak, frayed, but it was there. Channel it, she thought. Not down, up. She poured everything she had left into the machine. Her life force, her will, the very energy that kept her heart beating. Jace felt her dying. He felt her light fading. "No," he cried. "Take mine! Elira, take mine!" He grabbed her shoulders and pushed his own mental strength toward her, his stubbornness, his endurance, his refusal to quit. She gasped, drawing on him. The core vented. It didn't explode. A massive beam of pure ionization shot from the station above, missing the planet, firing straight out into the deep black of the nebula. The sky turned a brilliant, blinding violet. The atmosphere ignited with ionization. An aurora, thousands of miles wide, rippled across the heavens, turning the night into a shimmering curtain of teal and gold. It was beautiful, and it was harmless. The countdown stopped. Elira let out a long sigh. Her legs gave way. Jace caught her, lowering her gently to the floor. She looked up at the aurora reflected in the shattered window. "Pretty," she murmured. Then her eyes closed, and she went limp in his arms. The weeks that followed were a gray blur of hospitals and courtrooms. Jay spent 4 days in a regeneration tank to fix his ribs and the burns on his chest. The moment they let him out, he went to the Royal Infirmary. Elira was in a coma for 10 days. When she finally woke up, she couldn't speak. The psychic strain had damaged her vocal cords. But she could write. And her first order, scribbled on a data pad with a shaking hand, was public trials. The tribunal was held in the Grand Plaza, under the open sky. There were no secret executions. Every piece of evidence, the Ares logs, the financial transfers, the recordings of Vadran was broadcast to every screen in the Dominion and the Alliance. It was ugly. Dozens of high-ranking nobles and human CEOs were exposed. Admiral Thorne testified in exchange for a life sentence, implicating half the Admiralty board. Elira watched from a hover chair, Jace standing at her side like a statue. She wanted the galaxy to see the rot so they could cut it out. When the verdicts were read, there was no cheering, just a solemn, heavy silence. It was the feeling of a fever breaking. 2 months later, Jace stood in the office of the new human ambassador. It was a nice offer. "Sergeant," the ambassador said, sliding a data pad across the desk. "Full pardon and promotion to major, back pay, and a quiet retirement package on a colony world of your choice. Hawaii is nice this time of year." Jace looked at the pad. It was a ticket out, a ticket to safety. "And the Queen?" Jace asked. The ambassador sighed. "The Seraphi Council, the new one, is grateful. But they are pragmatic. Elira is young. She is damaged. They want her to marry a duke from the Southern Reach to cement the peace treaty, a human consort. Well, it complicates things. It reminds people of the war." Jace picked up the pad. "I understand," he said. He walked out of the office. He didn't go to the spaceport. He went to the rooftop garden of the palace. Elira was there, standing by the railing. She was walking with a cane now, and her voice was a husky rasp. But she was standing. Jace threw the data pad off the roof. It tumbled down into the mist. Elira didn't turn around. "They offered you an exit?" "Yeah," Jace said, leaning on the railing beside her. "Hawaii. Apparently, the pineapples are great." "Why didn't you take it?" she asked quietly. "Because I don't like pineapple," Jace said. "And because my wife is here." Elira turned to him. "Jace, look at us. We are broken. I can barely walk. You have nightmares every time a door slams. They say we are bad for stability. They say our love is a scar on history." "Do you believe them?" Jace asked. Elira looked at him. She reached out and touched his face. "I believe," she whispered, "that scars are just proof that you survived." She took a step back. She dropped her cane. It clattered on the stones. She stood unsupported, swaying slightly but holding her ground. She looked him in the eye. "Jace Rowan, I am done with laws. I am done with fire. I am done with doing what is expected." She took his hand. "Will you be my husband now? Not to save my life, not to save the Empire, but just because you want to wake up next to me? Will you choose me?" Jace looked at her. He saw the woman who had laughed over bad stew, the woman who had fought a war for the right to be kind. "I choose you," he said, his voice shaking. Today, tomorrow, every day until the stars burn out. There was no priest, no crowd, just the wind and the lights of the rebuilding city. I, Jace, take you. Alira, he whispered, to have and to hold. And I take you, she answered, pressing her palm to his chest. My shield, my heart, my equal. They kissed. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't hurried. It was slow, deep, and filled with the quiet certainty of stone. Epilogue. 7 years later, the central market of Lyrian was a riot of noise and color. The scent of roasting spices filled the air. Jace walked through the crowd, carrying a basket of fruit. He walked with a slight limp, and his hair had more gray in it now, but he smiled easily. Beside him, Alira moved with a grace that had returned over time. She stopped at a stall where a human merchant was selling intricate clockwork toys to a group of seraphi children. Above the stall hung a banner. It was the new flag of the Alliance. It didn't feature swords or stars. It featured a stylized image, a human hand clasping a luminous four-fingered seraphi palm. Mama! Papa! A small projectile hurtled toward them. Alira caught the girl, a 4-year-old with human ears and faint shimmering markings on her cheeks, and swung her up. Easy, Ilara. Alira laughed, her voice still possessing that husky edge. You run like a drone. Did you get the tart berries? Ilara demanded, looking at Jace. I got them. Monster, Jace said, ruffling her hair. They walked together toward the palace lift. The people in the market nodded as they passed. They didn't bow and scrape anymore. They waved. Some called out, Morning, Jay, or Good day, Ale. They were still queen and consort, but they were citizens first. That evening, after Alara was asleep, Jace and Alira stood on the balcony of their private quarters. The city below was bright and whole. The aurora from the weapon discharge was gone, but the stars remained. Jace wrapped his arms around Alira from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. She leaned back into him, fitting perfectly against his chest. Does it ever go away? She asked softly. The memory of the fire? No, Jace said honestly. I still smell the smoke sometimes. Me too, she admitted. I close my eyes, and I am back in that corridor. I am waiting to die. And then you pick me up. Jace turned her around so he could look at her face. The bioluminescence on her skin was soft and steady, a warm gold. We carried each other. Ale. That's the point. He kissed her forehead. You know, people say the bravest thing we did was fight the fleet or kill Vadran. Alira smiled, touching the gray at his temples. They are wrong, she said. Yeah, Jace agreed, pulling her close as the twin moons rose over the horizon. The bravest thing we did was this. Choosing each other, again and again, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Alira rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady, strong rhythm of his heart. And that, she murmured, closing her eyes in content, is a lesson I hope they never forget.